The Silver Spur Saloon sat at the edge of a town that didn't have a name worth remembering. Dust-covered, sun-bleached, the kind of place where people came to disappear or die, sometimes both. The building leaned slightly to the left, had for years, wood warped by heat and time. Inside, the air hung thick with tobacco smoke, and the sour smell of spilled beer that had soaked into floorboards no one bothered to clean anymore. Cole Harland sat alone at a corner table, his back to the wall, a glass of whiskey in front of him that he hadn't touched in 20 minutes. He wasn't a big man, not the kind who commanded attention by size. Average height, lean build, dark hair that needed cutting. But there was something in the way he sat, perfectly still, eyes always moving, that made the other patrons give him space. The bartender had stopped asking if he needed anything. Cole knew they were coming, had known for 3 days, ever since he'd heard the rumors in the last town. 3 names whispered with a mix of fear and respect. Brennan, Pike, Klein. Bounty hunters. Good ones. The kind who brought their targets in breathing if the poster said alive, dead if it didn't. They didn't chase drunk cowboys or petty thieves. They went after men who knew how to kill. Men like Cole. The wanted poster carried his name, his rough description, and a number that made men stupid, $5,000. In this part of the territory, that was enough to buy a ranch, start a new life, or drink yourself to death in style. It was the kind of money that made professionals travel hard and plan carefully. But Cole wasn't running. Running was what they expected. The saloon door swung open and the afternoon light cut through the smoke like a blade. 3 silhouettes filled the doorway, pausing just long enough for their eyes to adjust. The conversations didn't stop immediately. It took a moment, but when the regulars recognized the type of men standing there, the noise died like someone had blown out a candle. Brennan came in first, tall, maybe 6'2", with a face that looked like it had been carved from old leather. Gray streaked his beard, but his eyes were sharp, predatory. He wore a long coat despite the heat, and Cole knew why. Extra guns. Probably a sawed-off under there, maybe 2 pistols on a belt rig. Brennan was the talker, the one who'd try to make the target surrender, make it easy. But his reputation said he was just as happy to make it hard. Pike followed, shorter, stockier, built like someone who'd spent years working cattle before he figured out hunting men paid better. He had a rifle in his hands, not slung over his shoulder. That told Cole everything. Pike was the insurance, the one who'd hang back and make sure nobody ran. His face was blank, unreadable, the look of a man who'd stopped feeling much about the work a long time ago. Klein came last, and he was the youngest of the 3, maybe 30. Clean-shaven, careful eyes that moved across the room in a pattern, cataloging exits and threats. 2 pistols worn low on his hips, tied down. A gunfighter, or at least someone who thought he was. His hands weren't near his weapons yet, but they weren't far either. Cole marked him as the dangerous one, not because he was the best shot, though he might be, but because he was still trying to prove something. The 3 of them spread out without speaking, a practiced movement that told Cole they'd done this before. Brennan moved toward the bar, angling so he could see the whole room. Pike stayed near the door, rifle held casual but ready. Klein drifted to the right, putting himself between Cole and the back exit. Smart, professional. Exactly what Cole had expected. The bartender, a thick-necked man named Dutch, who'd seen enough violence to know when more was coming, set down the glass he'd been cleaning and took 2 steps back. The few remaining customers found reasons to leave, moving slowly, carefully, nobody wanting to draw attention or catch a stray bullet. Within a minute, the saloon was empty except for the 4 men and Dutch, who looked like he wanted to follow the others but couldn't quite make his feet move. "You can go," Cole said, his voice quiet, directed at the bartender. "This won't take long." Dutch looked at Brennan, then at Cole, then decided Cole's suggestion sounded better than staying. He disappeared through the back, and the door creaked shut behind him. Now it was just the 4 of them. Brennan let the silence stretch, probably thinking it would make Cole nervous. It was a good tactic. Let the tension build, let the target start thinking about all the ways this could end badly. But Cole had been in this position before, had been in worse, and silence didn't bother him. He used it, let his eyes move across all 3 men, cataloging details. Brennan favored his left side slightly. Old wound, maybe, or just habit. Either way, he'd pivot that direction if things went bad. Pike's breathing was too controlled, nervous, trying not to show it. Klein's right hand had a tremor, barely visible. Not fear, anticipation. He wanted this to go loud. "Cole Harland," Brennan said finally, his voice deep, measured. "That's you, isn't it?" Cole didn't answer. Didn't need to. $5,000, Brennan continued. "That's a lot of money. Enough to make men do stupid things. But we're not stupid, Cole. We've been doing this a long time." "I can tell," Cole said. "Poster says dead or alive," Klein added, his voice younger, harder. "Your choice which?" "Klein," Brennan said, not looking at him, a warning in the single word. The younger man's jaw tightened, but he didn't say anything else. Pike shifted his weight, the rifle moving slightly. "We got a wagon outside," he said. "You come quiet. Maybe we get a drink after. Split some of that money with you for making it easy." Cole almost smiled at that. It was a lie, of course, but a good one. Appeal to greed, make surrender sound like a business decision instead of defeat. "How'd you find me?" Cole asked. Brennan tilted his head slightly. "You're not as careful as you think. Left a trail from Silver City. Barkeep there remembered a man matching your description, said you asked about this place. We just followed the breadcrumbs. Also a lie, or at least only half true." Cole had left that trail on purpose. Made sure he was memorable in Silver City, asked questions that would get repeated. He'd needed them to find him here, in this specific saloon, at this specific time. You couldn't set a trap without bait. "What'd you do, anyway?" Klein asked. "Poster doesn't say." "Klein," Brennan said again, sharper this time. "We're not here to make friends." But Cole answered anyway, his voice flat, factual. "Killed a man in Tucson. Man named Vernon Ellis." "Ellis?" Pike's eyes narrowed. "Heard of him. Railroad money, wasn't he?" "Was," Cole confirmed. "That explains the price," Brennan said. "Rich man's vengeance always pays better than justice." Cole didn't respond to that. There wasn't anything to say. Vernon Ellis had been rich, yeah, and connected, and the kind of man who thought money made him untouchable. He'd been wrong about that, but being wrong didn't bring him back. "So here's how this works," Brennan said, settling into what was clearly a familiar speech. "You stand up, slow, keep your hands where we can see them. Walk toward the door. We put irons on you, get you in the wagon, ride back to Tucson. You testify that we treated you fair, and maybe we throw in a good word, get you a hanging instead of something slower." "That's generous," Cole said. "We're generous men," Brennan replied. "When we can afford to be." Klein's hand dropped closer to his gun. "And if he's not interested in generous?" "Then we do it the other way," Pike said quietly, the rifle coming up just an inch. Cole looked at his whiskey glass, still full, amber liquid catching the light filtering through the saloon's dirty windows. He'd ordered it specifically, asked for the expensive stuff, paid for it in advance. Not because he particularly wanted a drink, but because he needed something in his hand when the moment came. "Can I finish my whiskey first?" he asked. Brennan considered this, probably calculating odds, weighing whether it was a trick. "Sure," he said finally, "but keep both hands on the table and drink slow." Cole reached for the glass with his right hand, his left staying flat on the scarred wood of the table. His fingers wrapped around the glass, and he could feel all three men tense, hands moving closer to weapons. But he just lifted it, slow like Brennan said, and brought it halfway to his lips before he stopped. "You boys know what I was before?" he asked. "Don't care," Klein said. But Brennan did care. Cole could see it. The older hunter's eyes had sharpened, and there was a new wariness there. "Army," Brennan said. "That's the rumor. Scout, maybe. Or something else." "Something else," Cole confirmed. "And what was that?" Pike asked, though he sounded like he wasn't sure he wanted to know. Cole took a sip of the whiskey, let it burn down his throat. "I trained men how to hunt other men, how to track them, how to predict what they'd do when they were scared or desperate or thought they were smarter than everyone else." "That right?" Brennan's voice had gone quiet, careful. "That's right," Cole said. "Taught them about patterns, how everyone's got them, even professionals, especially professionals. Training makes you good, but it also makes you predictable." Klein laughed, but it sounded forced. "You saying we're predictable?" Cole set the glass down, still holding it. "You spread out the second you walked in. Textbook." Brennan at the bar for a wide view, Pike on the door to block escape, Klein covering the back exit. I'd bet money you've done it exactly that way 100 times. Works, doesn't it? Pike said. Usually, Cole agreed. Against men who panic, men who make mistakes. You know what you're doing. I'll give you that. But, Brennan prompted, but you're doing it to someone who taught the people who taught you. The silence that followed was different now, heavier. Brennan's eyes had gone flat, calculating. Pike's breathing had changed, faster despite his attempt to control it. Klein's hand was on his gun now, not drawing but touching it, feeling the weight. Big talk, Klein said, for a man sitting alone against 3. Is it? Cole asked. Let me tell you what happens next. Brennan, you're going to try one more time to talk me into surrender, because that's what you do. You're good at it, probably talked down 50 men who could have made this hard. But when I don't fold, you're going to give Klein a signal, something subtle, and he's going to draw first because he's the fastest and he knows it. Klein's face flushed, angry at being read so easily. Pike, Cole continued, you'll be backup, but you're also worried about crossfire, so you'll wait a half second to see how it develops. That half second is going to feel like the right tactical choice, but it's going to cost you. You done? Brennan asked, his voice hard now, the reasonable negotiator gone. Almost, Cole said. You should also know that I picked this table for a reason, this saloon for a reason, this town for a reason. Everything about where we are right now, I chose. Doesn't matter where you are, Pike said. Still 3-on-1. Cole smiled then, and it wasn't a nice expression. Yeah, that's the other thing I taught them. Numbers matter, but numbers don't mean as much as people think when the shooting starts. Takes about 2 seconds for 3 men to die if the first man knows what he's doing. You boys probably think you're the first men. You're not. Brennan's hand moved inside his coat, slow, deliberate. Last chance, Cole. Stand up, hands visible, or we end this. You know what the problem is with being a professional? Cole asked, still holding his whiskey glass, still sitting relaxed in his chair. You start thinking everyone else is an amateur. You've built a career on being better than drunk cowboys and desperate thieves. But sometimes, boys, you run into someone who's playing a different game. No more talk, Klein said, his voice tight. Brennan, give the word. Brennan studied Cole for another long moment, and Cole saw the decision crystallize behind his eyes. The older hunter had probably hoped this would go easy, but he wasn't surprised that it wouldn't. Men didn't get $5,000 bounties by being soft. Your funeral, Brennan said quietly. And Klein's hand dropped to his gun. But Cole was already moving. The whiskey glass came up fast, liquid spraying out in an arc that caught Brennan full in the face. It wasn't about blinding him, though it did that. It was about breaking his focus, shattering that split second of tactical calculation that every gunfighter built their survival on. Cole's chair scraped backward as he dove left, his right hand finding his pistol with the kind of muscle memory that came from doing something 10,000 times. The table kicked over as he moved, creating a barrier that wasn't much but was something. Klein drew fast, faster than Cole had expected, even knowing the man was quick. The first shot went high, punching through the wall where Cole's head had been a heartbeat earlier. The second shot caught the edge of the overturned table, splinters exploding. But Cole's first shot didn't miss. The bullet took Klein in the chest, dead center, and the younger man's third shot went wild as he staggered backward. His face showed surprise more than pain, the look of someone who'd always been the fastest until he wasn't. Pike brought the rifle up, fast for a man his size, but he'd hesitated just like Cole predicted. That half second of waiting to see how it developed. The rifle barrel was still coming level when Cole's second shot hit him in the throat. Pike dropped the rifle, both hands going to his neck, blood spraying between his fingers. He tried to say something, maybe call for help or curse or just make a sound, but nothing came out except a wet gurgle. He went down hard, knees hitting first, then his face. Brennan had cleared the whiskey from his eyes and had a pistol out, the sawed-off shotgun still under his coat. He fired twice, and one of the rounds caught Cole in the left shoulder, spinning him halfway around. Pain flared bright and immediate, but Cole had been shot before, knew how to work through it. He put his third shot into Brennan's left side, exactly where he'd seen the man favor. Brennan grunted, stumbled against the bar, fired again. This shot went closer, close enough that Cole felt the heat of it pass his cheek. Cole's fourth shot hit Brennan in the chest. The older hunter sat down hard, his back against the bar, gun falling from fingers that suddenly wouldn't grip. Blood spread across his shirt, dark and wet. His eyes found Cole, and there was something like understanding there, like he finally got the lesson, but too late to use it. "Told you," Cole said, breathing hard, his own blood starting to soak through his shirt. 2 seconds. Brennan tried to laugh, but it came out as a cough. "Should have taken the easy money." "Yeah," Cole said. "You should have." Klein was still alive somehow, lying on his back and staring at the ceiling with glassy eyes. His lips moved, but no sound came out. Cole walked over, his left arm hanging useless, and looked down at the younger man. "It's not fair," Klein managed to whisper. "No," Cole agreed. "It's not." He put the 5th shot through Klein's heart, because leaving a man to drown in his own blood wasn't something Cole did. Clean kills, fast kills, that was the only mercy he offered. Pike was already gone, his eyes empty, blood pooling around his head. Brennan lasted another minute, maybe 2. Cole pulled out a chair, sat down, carefully, his shoulder screaming, and watched the light fade from the older hunter's eyes. Neither of them spoke. There wasn't anything left to say. When it was over, when all 3 men were still and the gun smoke was starting to clear, Cole stood up. His shoulder hurt like fire, and his left arm wouldn't do much, but he'd live. He walked to the bar, found a bottle of whiskey, the real stuff, not the rotgut they served most customers, and took a long drink straight from the bottle. The bartender, Dutch, came back in through the rear door, moving slow and careful like he expected more shooting. He stopped when he saw the bodies, his face going pale. "Jesus," he breathed. "Get a doctor," Cole said, his voice rough, "and tell whoever's wearing a badge in this town that it was self-defense." They drew first. "They did," Dutch confirmed, his voice shaking slightly. "I saw through the window, all of it." "Good," Cole said, "because I'd hate to have to explain it twice." He took another pull from the bottle, felt the whiskey burn mixing with the pain burn, both of them settling into something he could manage. 3 professionals had walked into the saloon looking for an easy payday. They'd found Cole Harland instead. And now they'd found out the difference. Cole sat back down at his table, or what was left of it after the gunfight, and waited. His shoulder needed tending, and there would be questions and probably a whole mess of trouble coming behind this. But right now, in this moment, he was alive and they weren't. That was all that mattered. The news would spread fast. 3 bounty hunters dead in some nameless town, killed by the man they came to collect. The story would grow in the telling, get bigger and more dramatic with each person who repeated it. By the time it reached Tucson, Cole figured it'd sound like he'd fought off 10 men while wounded and half blind. But the truth was simpler, cleaner. He'd known they were coming. He'd known how they'd move. And he'd used that knowledge to turn their training against them. Because that's what Cole did. That's who he was. A hunter who refused to be hunted. A man who understood that in the world of violent men, the one who thought differently usually walked away. He finished the bottle, stood up despite the pain, and walked toward the door. Behind him, 3 corpses cooled on the saloon floor. Ahead of him, somewhere in the distance, more hunters waited. Let them come. Cole Harland was just getting started. The doctor's name was Millwood, and his hands shook worse than Pike's had before the shooting started. He worked on Cole's shoulder in the back room of what passed for a medical office, pulling the bullet out with tweezers that looked like they'd been used to fix watches. Every probe sent fire through Cole's arm, but he'd learned a long time ago how to swallow pain and keep his face blank. "You're lucky," Millwood said, his voice thin and reedy. "Another inch to the right, and this would have clipped the artery. You'd have bled out before I got here." "Luck had nothing to do with it," Cole said. "Brennan was aiming center mass. I moved." Millwood didn't respond to that, just kept working, threading a needle with catgut that looked clean enough. The stitches pulled tight, and Cole felt each one, counted them. 12. When it was done, the doctor wrapped the shoulder in clean bandages and stepped back, wiping sweat from his forehead despite the room being cool. "Keep it clean," he said. "Change the dressing twice a day. If it starts smelling bad or you get a fever, find another doctor because you'll need the arm cut off, and I don't do that kind of work anymore." "Appreciated," Cole said, fishing coins from his pocket with his good hand. He paid double what the doctor asked, because word of mouth mattered, and he might need Millwood's discretion later. The doctor took the money, pocketed it quickly, and cleared his throat. Those men you killed, they have friends? Everyone's got friends, Cole said, pulling his shirt back on carefully. The fabric stuck to the bandages in places, and his left arm was mostly useless, but he'd worked with worse. Why? Because word travels, and from what I hear, those three weren't the type to work alone. They had connections. People who'll want to know what happened. Cole stood, testing his balance. The whiskey had worn off enough that his head was clear, but not so much that the pain had come back full force. Let them know. I'll be here another day, maybe two. Anyone wants to discuss it, they know where to find me. Millwood's eyes widened. You're not leaving? After what you just did? Why would I leave? Cole asked, genuinely curious. Running makes it look like I did something wrong. You killed 3 men. 3 men who drew on me first. You said yourself you saw it through the window. They came looking for trouble, found it, didn't like how it turned out. That's not my problem. The doctor shook his head, the gesture of a man who'd seen too much violence and still couldn't understand it. You're either the bravest man I've met or the craziest. Maybe both, Cole said, and walked out into the fading afternoon light. The town, such as it was, had come alive with the news. People stood in clusters, talking in low voices that got quieter when Cole passed. Some looked at him with fear, others with something that might have been respect, or might have been the same look people gave a rattlesnake they weren't sure was dead yet. Cole ignored them all, walking back toward the silver spur with his right hand free and his coat unbuttoned despite the chill starting to creep into the air. The bodies were gone by the time he got there. Dutch had cleaned up most of the blood, though dark stains marked the floor where Pike and Klein had fallen. The bartender looked up when Cole walked in, and something complicated crossed his face. Relief mixed with worry, mixed with the kind of exhaustion that came from a day going sideways. Thought you'd be halfway to Mexico by now, Dutch said. Cole pulled out a chair at a different table. This one still intact, and sat down slowly. His shoulder protested, but everything protested these days. Pour me something that won't kill me, and we'll call it even for the mess. Dutch poured whiskey from a bottle that actually had a label, brought it over with a glass that looked clean. He set both down and stood there, clearly wanting to say something, but not sure how to start. Spit it out, Cole said. The sheriff came by, looked at the bodies, talked to me about what I saw. He said it was self-defense, clean as these things get, but he also said you should probably move on. Not because you're wanted here, but because Stain's asking for more trouble. Sheriff got a name? Garrett. Been wearing the badge about 6 months, mostly keeps drunks from killing each other on Saturday nights. This kind of thing, professional bounty hunters getting killed, it's above his pay grade, and he knows it. Cole poured himself a drink, used his right hand because his left was still about as useful as a wooden puppet's. Garrett say anything else? Dutch hesitated, then pulled out the other chair and sat down. He said the wagon those 3 came in is still outside. Said he looked through it, found papers with your name, descriptions, known associates if you had any. There was also a telegram sent from Tucson about a week ago. What'd it say? Said there were others coming, not just those 3. Said Vernon Ellis's brother put the bounty up, and he's not the type to accept failure. Sheriff figured once word gets out that Brennan and his boys are dead, more will come. Better hunters, meaner hunters, or just more of them at once. Cole sipped the whiskey, let it settle. How many more? Telegram didn't say. But the sheriff, he's worried. Says a town like this can't handle a war, and that's what it'll turn into if hunters keep coming and you keep killing them. Eventually, someone innocent catches a bullet, and then he's got real problems. So he wants me gone. He's asking, polite-like. Says you're within your rights to stay, but he's asking. Cole looked around the saloon, taking in the scarred wood, the crooked paintings on the walls, the smell of old beer and older violence. It wasn't much, this place, but it had served its purpose. He'd proven a point here, sent a message that would spread faster than smallpox. But Dutch was right, and so was the sheriff. Staying too long would turn this nameless town into a graveyard, and most of the graves wouldn't deserve to be filled. I'll leave tomorrow, Cole said finally. First light. That give your sheriff enough time to sleep easy? Relief washed over Dutch's face. Yeah, that'll work. Where you headed? South? Maybe west after that. Depends on who's following. You really think they'll keep coming? Even after what you did to those 3? Cole smiled, but there wasn't any humor in it. That's exactly why they'll keep coming. 3 professionals walk into a saloon, none of them walk out, and the man they came for sits down and finishes his drink with a bullet hole in his shoulder? That's not a warning, Dutch. That's an advertisement. Every hunter with more pride than sense is going to think they're the one who can do what Brennan couldn't. And are they? No, Cole said simply. But they don't know that yet. Dutch stood up, wiping his hands on his apron, even though they weren't dirty. You need anything tonight? Food, a room, another bottle? All 3. And tell whoever's cooking not to spare the salt. I've had enough bland trail food to last a lifetime. I'll tell Mary. She runs the kitchen, such as it is. Room's upstairs, second door on the left. I'll bring up the food and bottle when it's ready. Cole nodded, stood, and made his way up the narrow stairs that creaked under his weight. The room was small, barely big enough for a bed and a washstand, but it had a window that overlooked the street and a door that locked. He checked the lock twice, then wedged a chair under the handle for good measure. Old habits. The bed was softer than he expected, and for a moment Cole considered just lying down and sleeping until his body forced him awake. But there was work to do first. He pulled off his shirt carefully, unwrapped the bandages, and examined the wound in the mirror above the washstand. The stitches looked solid, and there was no smell yet, no heat radiating from the skin around them. Millwood had done decent work for a man with shaky hands. Cole rewrapped the shoulder, pulled on a clean shirt from his saddlebag, and sat on the edge of the bed to field strip and clean his pistol. The routine was automatic, something he could do half asleep or fully drunk. Remove the cylinder, check each chamber, wipe down the barrel, oil the moving parts. The gun had saved his life more times than he could count, and taking care of it wasn't optional. He'd just finished reassembling it when a knock came at the door. 3 taps, then 2, then 1. The pattern Dutch had used downstairs, which meant it wasn't someone trying to catch him off guard. "It's open," Cole called, the pistol back in his hand anyway. Dutch came in carrying a tray with something that smelled like actual food instead of the jerky and hardtack Cole had been living on. Behind him came a woman, maybe 40, with gray threading through dark hair and eyes that had seen enough of life to be cautious, but not enough to be broken. "This is Mary," Dutch said, setting the tray on the small table by the window. "Best cook in 3 counties, if you don't count the counties that actually have restaurants." "Ma'am," Cole said, nodding. Mary looked him over, her gaze stopping on the fresh bandage visible through his unbuttoned shirt. "Dutch says you're leaving tomorrow." "That's the plan." "Good. Not because I don't appreciate what you did. Those 3 were asking for trouble the second they walked in. But because this town's got enough problems without becoming known as the place where bounty hunters go to die." "Fair enough," Cole said. She moved to the tray, lifted the cover off a plate that held actual steak, potatoes that looked like they'd been cooked in bacon fat, and greens that were probably the first vegetables Cole had seen in 2 weeks. "You eat that while it's hot. Dutch said you wanted salt, so I put extra. And there's pie after if you're still hungry." "Obliged," Cole said, and meant it. Mary and Dutch left him alone, and Cole ate slowly, savoring every bite. The steak was tough but flavorful. The potatoes were crispy on the outside and soft inside, and the greens had been cooked with onions and something else he couldn't identify but tasted good. When he was done, he found the pie, apple, still warm, and ate that too. Full stomach, clean weapon, defensible room. It was as close to comfortable as Cole got these days. He pulled the chair away from the door, positioned it so he could see both the entrance and the window, and settled in to wait. Sleep would come eventually, but not yet. Not until he was sure the town had settled down for the night, and no one was getting ideas about collecting that bounty while he rested. Outside, the sun finished setting, and the street below went dark except for lights from a few windows. Cole watched shadows move, tracked a drunk stumbling from one saloon to another, saw a couple arguing on a porch 2 buildings down. Normal life. The kind that kept happening whether men killed each other or not. Somewhere south, or maybe west, or maybe already on their way here, more hunters were making plans. They'd heard about the bounty, heard about Brennan and his crew, and they were doing the math. $5,000 split no ways was better than any honest work they could find. And maybe, just maybe, they were better than Brennan had been. Cole hoped they were. The easy kills were getting boring. His eyes grew heavy sometime after midnight, and he let them close for a few seconds at a time, never more than that. Microsleeps, enough to keep him functional without leaving him vulnerable. It was a trick he'd learned in the army, when staying awake for 3 days straight meant the difference between living and letting your squad get ambushed. The night passed slowly, each hour marked by the distant sound of a church bell that someone kept wound despite the town not having much use for religion. At some point, Cole actually slept, real sleep, deep enough that he dreamed. The dreams weren't good, they never were. But he was used to that too. Dawn came gray and cold, the kind of morning that promised rain later. Cole woke fully, his shoulders stiff but manageable, and took stock. No one had tried the door during the night, no one had taken shots through the window. As far as quiet nights went, this one had been successful. He packed his saddlebag, checked his pistol again out of habit, and headed downstairs. Dutch was already behind the bar, looking like he hadn't slept much either. "Coffee's on," the bartender said, pouring a cup without being asked. "Mary's got breakfast cooking, if you want it." "I do," Cole said, taking the coffee. It was strong enough to strip paint, which meant it was perfect. Mary brought out eggs, more bacon, and bread that was still hot from the oven. Cole ate at the bar, aware that a few early risers had started filtering in and were watching him with various degrees of interest and concern. "Word's already spreading," Dutch said quietly, refilling Cole's cup, "about what happened yesterday. Some are saying you killed those 3 before they could draw, ambushed them. Others are saying it was a fair fight, but you cheated somehow, used tricks. Nobody's saying the truth, which is that you were just better." "Truth never spreads as fast as lies," Cole said. "Lies are more interesting. Sheriff stopped by early this morning, asked me to give you this." Dutch slid a piece of paper across the bar. Cole unfolded it, read the short message written in surprisingly neat handwriting. "Mr. Harland, appreciate your cooperation. Deputy in Loadstone, 2 days south, is a friend. His name is Chen. Mention mine and he'll give you fair warning if trouble's headed your way. Safe travels." Garrett Cole pocketed the note. "Sheriff's a decent man." "He tries," Dutch agreed. "Doesn't always succeed, but he tries. That counts for something." Cole finished his breakfast, paid for the room and food with enough extra to cover the trouble, and shook Dutch's hand. The bartender's grip was firm, the handshake of someone who'd worked hard his whole life. "You take care of yourself," Dutch said, "and maybe find a place where the bounty hunters can't reach you." "No such place," Cole said, "but I appreciate the thought." He collected his horse from the stable, a gray gelding named Smoke, who'd been with him for 3 years and had the good sense to stay calm when guns started firing. The stable boy, a kid maybe 14 with scared eyes, took the payment and backed away quickly, like Cole might turn violent at any moment. The ride out of town was quiet, watched by faces in windows and a few people brave enough to stand on their porches. Cole kept Smoke at a walk until they cleared the last building, then let the horse find his own pace. South, like he'd told Dutch, following a road that was more suggestion than actual construction. The morning warmed as the sun climbed and the promised rain held off. Cole rode with his right hand free and his awareness spread wide, watching the horizon, listening for sounds that didn't belong. Twice he stopped to rest Smoke and check their back trail. Both times he saw nothing, but that didn't mean no one was there. By midday the shoulder had started aching in earnest, a deep throb that spoke of torn muscle and the body's desperate attempt to heal itself. Cole stopped by a creek, let Smoke drink, and changed his bandages. The wound looked clean still, no infection yet, but it would be days before he could use that arm properly. He was rewrapping the bandage when he heard the horse. Single rider, coming from the north, moving at a steady trot. Cole finished with the bandage, pulled his shirt back on, and positioned himself behind a rock outcropping that gave him cover and a clear line of sight to the road. The rider came into view a few minutes later. Young, maybe 25, wearing range clothes that had seen hard use. He rode a paint horse that looked tired, and his posture suggested someone who'd been in the saddle for days. No rifle visible, but that didn't mean much. Could be a hunter, could be a drifter, could be someone who just happened to be on the same road. Cole waited until the rider was close enough to hear, then called out, "That's far enough." The rider pulled up sharp, hands going up instinctively. "Whoa, friend, not looking for trouble." "Nobody ever is," Cole said, stepping out from behind the rock, with his pistol drawn, but not pointed directly at the rider. "What's your business on this road?" The rider took in Cole's face, the bandaged shoulder, the professional way the gun was held. Recognition flickered across his features, followed quickly by fear. "You're him. You're Cole Harland. And you are? Nobody. I mean, my name's Thomas Reed, but I'm nobody important. I'm just passing through, heading south to find work. I heard about what happened in town. Everyone's talking about it, but I don't want any part of it. I'm not a hunter. I'm not collecting bounties. I'm just trying to get to Loadstone before my money runs out. Cole studied him, looking for tells. The fear seemed genuine, and Reed's hands were still up, making no move toward any weapon. His eyes kept darting to Cole's gun and then away. The behavior of someone who knew what bullets did to flesh and wanted no part of it. You working for Vernon Ellis's brother? Cole asked. I don't even know who that is, Reed said, his voice cracking slightly. I swear on my mother's grave, I'm nobody. I fix fences, I shoe horses when I can, I do whatever work pays. I'm not a fighter. Then why are you on this road? Because it's the only road heading south from that town. I came through yesterday, heard about the shooting, slept in the stable because I couldn't afford a room, and left this morning. That's it. That's the whole story. Cole let the silence stretch, watching Reed squirm. The kid, and he was a kid, despite being grown, looked about ready to bolt or cry or both. Finally, Cole lowered the pistol, though he didn't holster it. Get down off the horse, he said. Reed dismounted, slow and careful, hands still visible. Look, whatever you're thinking, empty your pockets, everything on the ground. Reed did as he was told, pulling out a handful of coins, a folding knife that looked like it had been sharpened too many times, a piece of jerky wrapped in cloth, and a crumpled letter. No gun, no extra ammunition, nothing that suggested he was anything other than what he claimed. Cole picked up the letter, unfolded it. It was from a woman named Sarah, talking about crops failing and hoping Thomas would send money soon if he found work. The handwriting was shaky, unpracticed, the words misspelled in places but genuine. Your mother, Cole asked. Sister, Reed said. Our folks died 3 years back. Fever took them both. I'm trying to keep her and her kids fed, but work's been scarce. Cole handed back the letter and the other items. You can go, but do me a favor. Anything. When you get to Loadstone, don't mention you saw me. Don't mention this conversation. Far as anyone asks, you rode this road alone and saw nothing worth talking about. Done, Reed said quickly, gathering his things and shoving them back in his pockets. I won't say a word. I promise. Thank you for not... He stopped, seemed to realize that thanking someone for not killing you was a strange thing to have to do, and just shut his mouth. One more thing, Cole said as Reed climbed back on his horse. You see any groups of riders, men who look like they know what they're doing, you turn around and find a different road. Don't care if it costs you 3 days. These roads are going to get dangerous for a while. Reed nodded, pale-faced, and kicked his horse into a trot that quickly became a gallop. Cole watched him disappear down the road, then waited another 10 minutes to make sure no one else was following. When he was satisfied, he mounted Smoke and continued south at a more leisurely pace. The encounter had rattled something loose in his thinking. Reed was what most people were, just trying to get by, trying to keep their families fed, wanting nothing to do with violence or bounties or the kind of life Cole led. But Reed had been on this road at the wrong time, and if Cole had been a different sort of man, the kid would be dead now for no reason except bad luck. That was the thing about the path Cole had chosen. It didn't just put him in danger, it put everyone around him in danger too, whether they wanted it or not. The sun was past its peak when Cole spotted the dust cloud on the horizon behind him. Multiple riders, moving fast. He'd been expecting something like this, had even planned for it, but seeing it still sent a spike of adrenaline through his system. He urged Smoke into a faster pace, not running, but not dawdling either, looking for terrain that would give him an advantage. The road ahead cut through a narrow valley with rocky outcroppings on both sides, the kind of place where a single man with a rifle could hold off a small army if he had enough ammunition. Cole didn't have a rifle, but he had something better. He had knowledge of how hunters thought. He found a spot where the valley narrowed to maybe 30 feet across, dismounted, and led Smoke behind a cluster of boulders that would provide cover. Then he climbed higher, finding a position that gave him a view of the road in both directions while keeping him mostly hidden. The riders came into view 20 minutes later, 5 of them, spread out in a loose formation that suggested they knew what they were doing. Cole pulled out a small spyglass from his saddlebag and studied each man. The leader rode a black stallion and wore a duster despite the heat. Tall, broad-shouldered, with a rifle in a saddle scabbard and what looked like 2 pistols on his belt. His face was hard, weathered, the kind that didn't smile much. The other 4 were a mix. 2 looked like brothers, both thin and wiry with matching hats and similar features. One was older, maybe 50, with gray hair and the careful posture of someone nursing old wounds. The last was the biggest of the group, well over 6 feet, and built like he could wrestle a bear and have decent odds. Professional crew. Not as polished as Brennan and his team had been, maybe, but competent enough to be a problem if Cole let them dictate the terms. He watched them slow as they approached the valley, saw the leader hold up a hand. They were being cautious, smart, probably assuming that if Cole had come this way, he'd set up an ambush somewhere. They were right, of course, but knowing there was a trap and finding it were different things. The leader sent the big man forward to scout, staying back with the others. The big man rode slowly, eyes scanning the rocks, one hand near his pistol. He made it about halfway through the valley before Cole decided it was time. He stood up, making himself visible on the outcropping, and called down. "That's far enough." All 5 riders reacted, hands going to weapons, horses sidling nervously. The big man froze, looking up at Cole's position, calculating odds. "Cole Harland," the leader called out, his voice carrying easily in the quiet valley. "We heard you were headed south, figured we'd catch up, have a conversation." "We're having one now," Cole said. "Say your piece." The leader walked his horse forward slowly, stopping next to the big man. "Name's Dalton Cross. These are my associates. We're working for Ellis, same as Brennan was. You killed 3 good men yesterday." "They weren't good enough," Cole said. Cross's jaw tightened, but he kept his voice level. "The bounty's still active, $5,000, but we're not interested in a fight if we can avoid it. Come with us peaceful. We'll make sure you get to Tucson alive, and we'll even testify that you cooperated. Judge might go easier on you." "And if I don't want to cooperate, then we do this the hard way. 5 against 1, even for you. Those aren't good odds." Cole smiled. "You'd think so, wouldn't you? But here's the problem with your plan, Dalton. You're down in a valley with no cover, and I'm up here with high ground and all day to work with. You try to rush me, I put bullets in whoever's in front, and the rest of you break and run because nobody wants to be the second man to die for $5,000 split 4 ways." One of the brothers spoke up, his voice younger than Cole expected. "He's bluffing. 1 gun, 5 of us. He can't reload fast enough." "Can I?" Cole drew his pistol in a smooth motion, fired twice into the ground near the brother's horse. The animal reared, nearly throwing its rider, and the sound of the shots echoed off the valley walls like thunder. Cole had the gun reloaded before the echoes faded, a feat that required more dexterity than his wounded shoulder wanted to give, but was worth it for the effect. The riders had scattered, finding what cover they could in the narrow valley, which wasn't much. Cross had his rifle out now, pointed in Cole's general direction but not aimed precisely. "Next shots go into flesh," Cole called down. "Your choice which flesh." "You can't stay up there forever," Cross said. "Eventually you have to come down, and when you do, we'll be waiting." "True," Cole admitted, "but I've got water, I've got food, and I've got a comfortable spot to sit. How long can you boys wait in the sun with no shade before someone gets impatient? My money's on the big one cracking first, but the brothers are a close second." He could see Cross thinking, weighing options, probably realizing that this wasn't going according to plan. Whatever intelligence they'd gathered about Cole, it probably hadn't included "we'll find high ground and turn a manhunt into a siege." "Counteroffer," Cole said. "You ride out of here, go back to Ellis, tell him that if he wants me dead, he's going to have to do better than sending 5 men I can see coming from a mile away. Tell him I'm not running, I'm not hiding, and anyone else he sends is going to end up the same way Brennan did." "Ellis doesn't take well to being told no," Cross said. "Then Ellis should have thought of that before he murdered Vernon." "Oh, wait, that was me. Ellis should have thought of that before he put a bounty on my head that's more insult than threat." The older rider, the one with the careful posture, spoke for the first time. "Why'd you do it? Kill Vernon Ellis, I mean." Cole considered not answering, then figured it didn't matter. "Because Vernon thought money meant he could do whatever he wanted to, whoever he wanted. Turns out he was wrong about that." "That's not much of a reason to kill a man," the older rider said. "It was enough for me." Cross was still thinking, still calculating. Cole could see it in the way his eyes moved, tracking distances, angles, odds. Finally, the bounty hunter lowered his rifle and holstered it, a gesture that was half surrender and half strategic retreat. "This isn't over," Cross said. Never said it was, Cole replied. But today it is, right out. For a long moment, nobody moved. Then Cross turned his horse, gestured to the others, and started back the way they'd come. The big man followed, then the older rider. The brothers looked at each other, seemed to have a silent argument, and finally followed as well. Cole watched them go, staying in position until they were out of sight and the dust had settled. Then he waited another hour, just to be sure, before climbing back down to where Smoke waited patiently. His shoulder was screaming now, the strain of climbing and shooting having pulled stitches that probably weren't ready for that kind of work. But he'd live, and more importantly, he'd sent another message. 5 hunters had found him, and 5 hunters had turned back without collecting. Word would spread about that too. And every time someone failed to bring him in, the bounty would get bigger, and the hunters would get more desperate. That was fine. Cole was counting on it. He mounted Smoke and continued south, leaving the valley behind. Somewhere ahead was Loadstone, and Deputy Chen, and whatever came after that. Somewhere behind him was Cross and his crew, probably already planning their next attempt. And somewhere in between was Cole Harland, a man who'd stopped running and started teaching the world what that meant. The afternoon wore on, the sun finally delivering on its promise of rain. The first drops started falling around 4, fat and warm, turning the road into mud within minutes. Cole pulled on his coat and kept riding, preferring wet to delayed. Rain would cover his tracks anyway, make it harder for anyone following to be sure which direction he'd gone. By the time night fell, he was soaked through and his shoulder felt like someone was driving nails into it with every step Smoke took. But he'd put 20 miles between himself and that valley, and that was enough for now. He made camp in a small cave that was more indent than actual shelter, built a tiny fire that gave just enough heat to dry his clothes without giving away his position, and forced himself to eat jerky that tasted like leather. Tomorrow, he'd reach Loadstone. Tomorrow, he'd find Deputy Chen and get whatever warning the sheriff's friend thought was worth passing along. Tomorrow, more hunters might show up, or maybe they'd wait, regroup, come at him different. It didn't matter. Cole had learned a long time ago that tomorrow came whether you were ready or not. The trick was being ready anyway. He checked his pistol one more time, cleaned and oiled it despite having done it that morning, and settled in for another night of light sleep and heavy awareness. Outside the cave, rain continued to fall, washing away blood and tracks and the evidence of violence. But it couldn't wash away what Cole had started. The hunt was on, and the hunters were learning a hard lesson. Sometimes the prey bites back. Loadstone was bigger than the last town, which wasn't saying much. It had actual streets instead of just a main road with buildings scattered around it, and the buildings themselves looked like they'd been built with some thought beyond keep the rain off. There was a general store, a hotel that advertised rooms with actual beds, 2 saloons competing for the same drunks, and a sheriff's office that looked sturdy enough to hold prisoners who actually wanted to escape. Cole rode in just after dawn, his shoulder throbbing with each breath and his patience worn thin from another night of shallow sleep. The rain had stopped sometime before midnight, leaving everything wet and steaming in the early heat. Smoke's hooves made sucking sounds in the mud as they navigated toward the sheriff's office. A man was sweeping the boardwalk in front of the office, moving slow and methodical. He looked up as Cole approached, and something changed in his posture. Not fear exactly, but awareness. Recognition, maybe. "Help you?" the man asked, still holding the broom, but his weight shifted in a way that suggested he could drop it and draw a weapon faster than the casual observer would expect. "Looking for Deputy Chen," Cole said, staying in the saddle. "Sheriff Garrett sent me." The man's eyes narrowed slightly, then he nodded. "That'd be me, James Chen, and you'd be Cole Harland, unless I miss my guess." "You don't miss much, do you?" "In my line of work, missing things gets you killed." Chen leaned the broom against the wall and gestured toward the office door. "Come on inside, coffee's on, and we should probably have this conversation where half the town can't hear it." Cole dismounted, tied Smoke to the rail, and followed Chen into the office. It was cleaner than most, papers organized on the desk, rifles locked in a rack behind bars, a smell of soap competing with the usual law office scents of gunpowder and old coffee. Chen poured 2 cups from a pot that looked like it had been sitting on the stove since the previous evening, handed one to Cole, and settled into the chair behind the desk. He was maybe 40, with the kind of build that came from regular work rather than trying to look intimidating. His face was hard to read, which Cole figured was intentional. "Garrett's telegram said you might be coming through," Chen said. Said you had some trouble up north, handled it professional, but that more trouble was likely following. That about covers it, Cole said, sipping the coffee. It was terrible, which meant it was perfect. He said you'd give me fair warning if hunters came through asking questions. I will, Chen confirmed. But fair warning doesn't buy you much if you're planning to stay. Loadstone's not like those smaller towns. We've got a mayor who cares about appearances, businessmen who don't like violence scaring off customers, and a judge who comes through once a month and actually enforces the law. You kill someone here, even in self-defense, it's going to be complicated. Not planning to kill anyone, Cole said, unless they make it necessary. Chen smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. That's what they all say. Then someone draws on them in a saloon, and suddenly there's bodies on my floor and paperwork on my desk. I can leave if you'd prefer. Just came by as a courtesy to Garrett. Didn't say that. Chen took a drink of his coffee, grimaced like he'd forgotten how bad it was, and set the cup down. What I'm saying is that if you stay, you keep it quiet. No showdowns in the street, no turning my town into the next chapter of your legend. You want to drink, eat, rest, get your shoulder looked at by a doctor who knows what he's doing, that's fine. But the second you bring your war here, we're going to have a problem. Cole appreciated the directness. No games, no dancing around the point. Fair enough. How long before the hunters figure out I'm here? If they're asking around, maybe a day. Maybe less if someone recognizes you and runs their mouth for the wrong audience. There's a telegraph office here, and news travels fast when there's money attached. I'll be gone before sunset tomorrow, Cole said. That work for you? Chen considered this, then nodded. Yeah, that works. Hotel's down the street. Ask for a back room if you want privacy. Doctor's office is next to the general store. Name's Patterson. Tell him I sent you and he'll keep his mouth shut about patients. Saloons are your risk, but the one on the east side is quieter if you need a drink without an audience. Appreciated. Cole stood, then paused. Garrett said you were a friend. He the trusting type, or did you earn that? Served together in the war, Chen said. Different units, but we ended up in the same hospital after different battles went wrong. Spent 3 months recovering, got to know each other. He's one of maybe 5 people I'd trust to watch my back, and I'm guessing I'm on the same short list for him. Must be nice, Cole said, having people you can trust. Chen studied him for a moment, and something like sympathy crossed his face. You could have that too, you know. Walk away from whatever this is. Find a place where nobody's hunting you. Start over. Tried that once, Cole said. Didn't take. Because you didn't want it to, or because the world wouldn't let you? Cole thought about that question, really thought about it, and realized he didn't have a good answer. Maybe both. He left Chen's office and walked Smoke to the livery stable, paid for a stall and extra feed, and gave the stable hand specific instructions about not letting anyone near his horse without Cole present. The hand, a kid who couldn't have been more than 16, nodded seriously and pocketed the extra coins like they were gold. The hotel was 2 stories built from actual lumber instead of salvaged materials, with windows that had real glass. Cole paid for a back room on the 2nd floor, carried his saddlebag upstairs that didn't creak, and locked himself in. The room was sparse but clean, with a bed that looked like it might actually be comfortable and a window that overlooked an alley instead of the main street. He stripped off his shirt, unwrapped the bandages, and examined the wound in the mirror above the washstand. The stitches had held, mostly, but a couple had torn from the climbing and shooting yesterday. The skin around them was red but not infected yet. He'd need Patterson to look at it, maybe redo the stitches that had pulled loose. But first, he needed sleep. Real sleep, not the half-aware dozing he'd been surviving on. Cole wedged a chair under the door handle, checked that his pistol was loaded and within reach, and lay down on the bed. The mattress was softer than anything he'd slept on in months, and despite the pain in his shoulder and the knowledge that hunters might be hours behind him, he was asleep within minutes. He dreamed of the war, which wasn't unusual. In the dream, he was younger, leading a patrol through territory that belonged to whoever had the most guns that day. They'd been tracking a sniper who'd killed 3 officers in 2 weeks, and Cole had finally figured out the pattern, predicted where the shooter would set up next. The dream shifted the way dreams do, and suddenly he was the sniper, looking down a rifle barrel at men who trusted their officer to keep them alive. He could see their faces, see the moment they realized they'd walked into a trap. The rifle kicked against his shoulder, and men fell, and Cole woke with his heart hammering and sweat soaking the sheets. The room was dim, late afternoon light filtering through the window. He'd slept for hours, deeper than he'd intended, and the fact that no one had tried to kill him during that time felt like a small miracle. Cole sat up slowly, his shoulder protesting, and took stock. The room was undisturbed, the chair still wedged under the door handle, his pistol still where he'd left it. Outside, he could hear normal town sounds, conversations, horses, the distant clang of a blacksmith's hammer. He rewrapped his shoulder with the last of his clean bandages and pulled on a fresh shirt. Time to see Dr. Patterson about those stitches, then get food that didn't come from his saddlebag, then decide whether staying another night was worth the risk. Patterson's office was easy to find, marked by a painted sign that looked like it had been done by someone with actual artistic talent. Cole pushed through the door and found a waiting room with 2 chairs and a desk where a woman sat writing in a ledger. "Help you?" she asked, looking up. She was maybe 30, with sharp eyes and the kind of no-nonsense demeanor that suggested she'd heard every excuse and complaint known to medicine. "Need to see the doctor. Deputy Chen sent me." Her expression shifted slightly, recognition or maybe just professional assessment. "You're the one with the shoulder wound. James mentioned you might come by." She stood, moved to an inner door, and called through it. "Doc, patient here." Patterson emerged a moment later, wiping his hands on a cloth that might have been white once but was now a permanent gray. He was older than Millwood, maybe 60, with steady hands and eyes that had seen enough bodies to know good work from bad. "Let's see it," he said, gesturing Cole toward an examination room that smelled of carbolic and something medicinal Cole couldn't identify. Cole stripped off his shirt and unwrapped the bandages. Patterson studied the wound without touching it, then gently probed the edges, checking the stitches. "Who did this work?" he asked. "Doctor named Millwood, town north of here. He did decent work for what he had to work with. These 2 stitches here are torn, and this area is more inflamed than I'd like, but it's not infected yet. You've been moving around too much." "Couldn't be helped." Patterson snorted. "It can always be helped. Sit still, let it heal, stop getting into fights. But I'm guessing that's not advice you're inclined to follow." "Not really." The doctor pulled out a needle and thread, sterilized both in a solution that made Cole's eyes water, and went to work. The pain was sharp and immediate, but Patterson's hands were steady and efficient. He removed the torn stitches, cleaned the wound again, and put in new ones that pulled tight enough to make Cole's breath hiss through his teeth. "Keep this clean," Patterson said when he was done, wrapping fresh bandages. "Change the dressing morning and night. If you start running a fever or the wound starts smelling bad, find another doctor immediately because that means infection, and infection means you lose the arm or die. Probably both." "Understood." "I'm serious. I've seen men tough as railroad spikes die from infected wounds because they thought they could wait it out. You can't wait out infection." Cole paid the doctor, collected his shirt, and stepped back out into the late afternoon. The sun was lower now, casting long shadows across the street. He was hungry, his shoulder hurt less than it had, and he still had the rest of the day to get through without incident. The saloon Chen had mentioned was on the east side, a building that looked newer than most and had actual curtains in the windows. Cole pushed through the doors and found a room that was maybe half full, with a bartender who looked bored and customers who looked like they were drinking to forget work rather than drinking to forget life. He took a table in the corner, ordered whiskey and whatever food the kitchen had, and settled in to wait. The whiskey came first, decent quality, and the food followed. Steak, potatoes, and bread that was fresh enough to still be warm. Cole ate slowly, aware of the occasional glance from other patrons, but mostly left alone. He was halfway through the meal when 3 men walked in. They didn't look like hunters, not exactly. Too clean, too well-dressed, wearing suits that had been tailored rather than bought off a rack. But the way they moved, the way their eyes swept the room, the way they positioned themselves, that was professional. The tallest of the 3 spotted Cole immediately, and something flickered across his face. Not surprise, more like confirmation. They'd been looking for him, and they'd found him. Cole set down his fork, wiped his mouth with a napkin, and waited. The tall man approached first, his companions hanging back near the bar. He was maybe 40, with dark hair going gray at the temples, and a face that belonged in a bank office rather than a saloon. But his eyes were cold, calculating, the eyes of someone who'd made hard decisions and slept fine afterward. "Mr. Harland," the man said, his voice smooth and educated, "may I join you?" "Free country," Cole said. Last I checked. The man sat, folding his hands on the table like he was opening a business meeting. My name is Marcus Webb. I represent certain interests in Tucson, specifically those of Mr. Lawrence Ellis. Vernon's brother. Indeed. Mr. Ellis has been following your activities with considerable interest. The death of his brother was a personal loss, but he understands that these things sometimes happen in frontier towns where the law is more suggestion than enforcement. Cole took a sip of whiskey, said nothing. Webb continued. However, the subsequent deaths of 8 hired professionals, 3 in the Silver Spur, 5 more who wisely declined to engage after your demonstration in the valley, have elevated this situation beyond personal grievance. You've become, shall we say, a problem that requires a more sophisticated solution. 8? Cole said. Cross and his crew didn't die. They rode away. Professionally speaking, they might as well have died. Their reputations are ruined. No one will hire them after they turned back from a single man with a wounded shoulder. Webb's smile was thin. You've cost Mr. Ellis a considerable sum in bounty payments to men who failed to deliver results. More importantly, you've made him look weak. In his business, perception is everything. What business is that? Mining, railroads, real estate, politics, the sort of enterprises that require a certain firmness when dealing with obstacles. And I'm an obstacle. You were an obstacle when you killed Vernon. Now you're something more troubling. You're a symbol, a demonstration that men with enough skill and nerve can defy the established order and walk away. That's dangerous, Mr. Harland. It gives people ideas. Cole leaned back in his chair, studying Webb. You didn't come here to philosophize about symbols. What does Ellis want? He wants to make you an offer, a generous one, considering the circumstances. Webb pulled a folded paper from his jacket, set it on the table. $20,000. Enough to disappear properly. Start a new life somewhere Ellis's reach doesn't extend. Mexico, maybe, or one of the territories so far west that no one cares who you were. In exchange for what? You leave tonight. You never speak about Vernon's death, never tell the story of what he did that made you kill him. And most importantly, you never come back to this part of the territory. You simply vanish, and we tell people that justice was served quietly, that the bounty was collected, that order has been restored. Cole looked at the paper but didn't touch it. What happens if I say no? Webb's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his eyes. Then Mr. Ellis escalates. No more bounty hunters, no more professional courtesy. He has resources you can't imagine and patience you can't outlast. He'll burn every town you pass through, ruin every person who helps you, turn your legend into a warning story about what happens when someone defies him. That sounds expensive. He can afford it. The question is whether you can afford to refuse. One of Webb's companions shifted near the bar, and Cole caught the movement. Both men had their hands near their coats, ready but not threatening yet. This whole conversation was walking a knife edge between negotiation and violence. Let me tell you what Vernon did, Cole said quietly, leaning forward. He came through a town called Esperanza about 6 months back. Found a woman there, a widow trying to keep her farm running after her husband died. Vernon decided he wanted that land, offered her pennies on the dollar. When she refused, he had his men burn her crops. When she still refused, he had them burn her barn. When she still refused, he came back himself and burned her house with her inside. Webb's face remained impassive. Mr. Ellis disputes that version of events. He says his brother made a legitimate business offer, and the woman's death was a tragic accident caused by a lamp she knocked over during an argument. There were witnesses, people who saw Vernon's men do it. I talked to them before I went to Tucson. Witnesses can be mistaken. Memories can be unreliable, especially when tragedy clouds judgment. You're calling me a liar? I'm saying that Mr. Ellis is willing to let the past remain in the past, provided you do the same. Take the money, disappear, live well. That's a better outcome than the alternative. Cole pushed the paper back across the table. Tell Ellis I'm not interested in his money or his threats. Tell him if he wants me dead, he'll have to do better than bounty hunters and lawyers in nice suits. And tell him that if he comes after anyone else the way he came after that widow, I'll finish what I started with Vernon. Webb took the paper back, folded it carefully, and returned it to his jacket. That's unfortunate, Mr. Harland. Truly. I had hoped we could resolve this like civilized men. We're not civilized, Cole said. We just pretend to be when it's convenient. Webb stood, adjusted his jacket, and looked down at Cole with something that might have been regret or might have been rehearsed sympathy. You should know that Mr. Ellis has already set his escalation in motion. By tomorrow, every lawman within 300 miles will have a telegram describing you as a dangerous fugitive wanted for multiple murders. The bounty is being raised to $10,000, and the next hunters won't be professionals with a code. They'll be desperate men who'll kill anyone standing near you just to make sure they get the right target. That's supposed to scare me? It's supposed to inform you of the reality you're choosing, but I can see you've made your decision. Webb turned to leave, then paused. One more thing. The widow in Esperanza? Her name was Sarah Morrison. She had 2 children, both under 10. They're being raised by her sister now in a town called Red Creek. Mr. Ellis knows where they are. He knows where everyone you've ever helped or spoken to is located. Food for thought. Webb walked out, his 2 companions following, and the saloon returned to its normal buzz of conversation. But Cole's appetite was gone, replaced by a cold anger that settled in his gut like a stone. Threatening him was one thing, threatening innocent people, children, just to make a point. That was something else. He finished his whiskey in one swallow, paid for the meal he hadn't finished, and walked out into the evening. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and red that reminded Cole of fire, of burning buildings and the smell of smoke. Back at the hotel, he found Chen waiting on the porch, leaning against a post like he'd been there for a while. Saw Webb and his boys leave the saloon, the deputy said. Figured that conversation didn't go well. Could have gone better, Cole admitted. You should know that Webb's got a reputation. He's not a fighter, but he's got connections. If he says Ellis is escalating, believe him. I do. Cole paused at the hotel door. You ever hear about a woman named Sarah Morrison, widow from a town called Esperanza? Chen's expression darkened. I heard. Heard what really happened too, not the official story. She didn't deserve what she got. Her kids. Where's Red Creek? About 100 miles east. Small town, farming community. Why? Webb mentioned them, made it sound like Ellis might go after them to get to me. Chen was quiet for a long moment, then he sighed. I'll send a telegram to the sheriff there, ask him to keep an eye on the Morrison kids and their aunt. Won't stop a determined attack, but it might make Ellis think twice if he knows someone's watching. Thank you. Don't thank me. Just don't make me regret helping you. Chen pushed off from the post, started to walk away, then turned back. Cole, I don't know what you're trying to prove here, but sooner or later you're going to run out of luck. Ellis has money, influence, and patience. You've got skill and anger. Skill runs out, and anger gets you killed. Probably, Cole said, but not today. He went to his room, barred the door, and stood at the window watching the street below. People walked by, normal people living normal lives, unaware that somewhere in the darkness men were making plans to kill the stranger in their town. Cole had meant what he said to Webb. He wasn't interested in Ellis's money or his threats. But the mention of Sarah Morrison's children had changed something. This wasn't just about survival anymore, or about refusing to run. It was about making sure that men like Vernon and Lawrence Ellis learned that there were consequences for what they did. Even if teaching that lesson cost Cole everything, he checked his pistol, reloaded it even though it was full, and settled into the chair by the window. Sleep would come later, if it came at all. Right now, he needed to watch and wait and think. Because Webb was right about one thing. Ellis was escalating, and tomorrow would bring new dangers. More hunters, meaner hunters, men who didn't care about codes or professional courtesy, men who'd kill anyone between them and $10,000. Cole had prepared for this, had known from the moment he pulled the trigger on Vernon that it would lead here. But knowing something was coming didn't make it easier when it arrived. Outside, the town settled into night. Lights went out in windows. The saloon stayed open, pouring drinks for men who needed to forget their troubles for a few hours. And somewhere out there, in the darkness beyond Loadstone, hunters were riding toward him. Let them come. Cole Harland had sent his message. 3 dead in the Silver Spur, 5 turned back in the valley, and now Webb and his threats sent packing without the answer Ellis wanted. The price on his head would keep climbing. The hunters would keep coming. And somewhere down the line, Cole would probably lose. The odds guaranteed it. But not tonight. And maybe not tomorrow. Cole watched the stars come out, bright and cold in the desert sky, and thought about Sarah Morrison burning in her house while Vernon Ellis walked away. Thought about her children growing up without a mother because a rich man wanted their land. Thought about all the other widows and orphans and broken families that men like Ellis created without a second thought. If this was Cole's last stand, at least it was for something that mattered. He stayed at the window until midnight, then checked the door one more time, positioned his chair so he could see both the entrance and the window, and let his eyes close for a few seconds at a time. Tomorrow would bring whatever it brought. But tonight, Cole was alive. Ellis's money was refused, and somewhere out there, word was spreading that Cole Harland didn't scare easy. That was enough. For now, that was enough. Dawn came too early and too loud. Cole jerked awake to the sound of horses, multiple riders moving fast down the main street. He was on his feet before his eyes were fully open, pistol in hand, shoulder screaming protest at the sudden movement. Through the window he counted 6 riders, maybe 7, moving with purpose toward the hotel. They weren't being subtle about it. He had maybe 2 minutes before they reached his door, maybe less if they decided to come in shooting. Cole grabbed his saddlebag with his good hand, shoved his spare ammunition and the few possessions that mattered into it, and moved to the window. The drop to the alley below was maybe 12 feet, manageable if he landed right, devastating if he didn't. The sound of boots on the stairs made the decision for him. Cole threw the saddlebag out first, heard it hit the dirt below, and climbed onto the windowsill. His shoulder protested every movement, the fresh stitches pulling tight. Below, the alley was empty, which meant either he was lucky or this was a trap with more pieces than he'd seen. He jumped. The landing was bad, his legs taking the impact wrong and sending him rolling into the alley wall. Pain shot through his shoulder, bright and immediate, and he felt at least one stitch tear. But he was down, he was moving, and the sound of his door being kicked in told him he'd made the right choice. Cole grabbed his saddlebag and ran, keeping low, heading for the livery stable 3 buildings down. Behind him, he heard shouting, someone yelling that the room was empty, another voice cursing and ordering them to check the alley. The stable was still locked, the kid who worked there probably still asleep in the back room. Cole didn't have time for niceties. He shot the lock off, the sound echoing in the pre-dawn quiet, and pushed through. Smoke was in the 3rd stall, already awake and alert from the commotion. Easy, Cole muttered, moving to the horse, getting the saddle on with hands that shook from adrenaline more than fear. Smoke stood still, patient, like he understood that speed mattered more than comfort right now. The stable door burst open and 2 men came through, guns drawn. They were young, maybe mid-20s, wearing range clothes and expressions that said they'd rather be anywhere else but were too committed to back out now. "Don't move," one of them said, his voice cracking slightly. Cole didn't stop saddling his horse. "You boys know who you're pointing those guns at?" "Cole Harland," the second one said. "Worth $10,000 now. That's 5 each if we bring you in." "If," Cole repeated. "That's the important word. You thought about what happens if you don't?" The first one's gun wavered slightly. "We got you cornered, 2 against 1. 3 dead in the Silver Spur thought they had me too. So did 5 more up north." Cole pulled the saddle cinch tight, still not looking directly at them. "But here's your problem. You're both scared. I can hear it in your voices, see it in how you're standing, and scared men make mistakes." "We're not scared," the second one said, but his voice betrayed him. "Sure you are, nothing wrong with it. Fear keeps you alive if you listen to it." Cole turned slowly, hands visible, empty. "So listen to it now. Walk away. Tell whoever sent you that I was gone before you got here. Split the cost of that busted lock and go find easier money." "Can't do that," the first one said. "We already told folks we were coming for you. We don't bring you in. We look like cowards." "Better to look like a coward than to be a corpse," Cole said. "Ask Brennan and his crew." "Oh, wait, you can't, because they're dead." The second one's finger tightened on the trigger, just a fraction, but enough. Cole saw it, read it, and moved. He dove left as the shot went high, rolled behind a stall door, came up with his pistol drawn. The first hunter was trying to track him, gun swinging around, and Cole put a bullet through his shoulder. The man screamed, dropped his weapon, went down hard. The second hunter fired twice more, both shots splintering wood near Cole's head. Cole returned fire, aiming low, hitting the man in the leg. He went down too, cursing, clutching his thigh. Cole stood, walked over to where both men lay bleeding and groaning. Neither was going to die from their wounds, not if they got help soon. He kicked their guns away, out of reach, and looked down at them. "You'll live," he said. "Get to a doctor, tell him what happened, tell him I said to Bill Lawrence Ellis for the treatment. And next time someone offers you $5,000 to hunt a man, remember this feeling and find different work." He mounted Smoke, guided the horse toward the stable's back exit, and rode out into the alley. Behind him, he could hear more shouting, more people converging on the stable. Chen would have his hands full explaining this mess, and Cole felt a stab of guilt about that. The deputy had asked for one thing: don't bring the war here, and Cole had failed within 12 hours. But guilt didn't stop bullets, and regret didn't change the fact that at least 10 men were now hunting him through Loadstone streets. Cole pushed Smoke into a gallop, heading for the edge of town. The sun was coming up properly now, painting everything in shades of orange and gold, and in that light he saw them. 4 riders blocking the south road, spread out in a line, weapons drawn. He pulled Smoke to a stop, calculating odds. 4 ahead, unknown numbers behind, and a wounded shoulder that was bleeding again. Not good odds, but he'd worked with worse. The center rider walked his horse forward a few steps. It was Webb, still in his fancy suit, but now with a rifle across his saddle and an expression that said negotiations were over. "Mr. Harland," Webb called out, "this is your last chance. Surrender now, and I give you my word you'll make it to Tucson alive." "Your word," Cole said. "That worth anything?" "More than your life is if you keep running." Cole glanced back. The other hunters were emerging from side streets, maybe 8 of them now, forming a loose perimeter. They were being smart, keeping distance, not giving him any easy targets. "Seems like a lot of men for one wounded bounty," Cole observed. "Mr. Ellis is tired of half measures," Webb said. "He sent me with simple instructions. Bring you back or bring proof you're dead. Your choice which?" Cole's mind raced through options. Fight and die here, surrounded. Surrender and probably die in Tucson after a show trial, or find a third option that nobody expected. The general store sat to his left, maybe 20 yards away, with a false front that extended above the actual roof. If he could reach it, get to that second-story window that probably led to storage space, he'd have high ground and cover. Not ideal, but better than sitting in the open. "I need a minute to think," Cole said. Webb smiled. "You don't have a minute. You have until I count to 3. 1, Webb started. Cole kicked Smoke hard, heading not for the riders ahead or behind, but straight for the general store. Shots rang out immediately, bullets whipping past, one clipping his hat and sending it flying. Smoke was fast, faster than the hunters expected, and they were firing at a moving target while trying not to hit each other. 2, Webb's voice called out, almost conversational. Cole reached the store's front porch, threw himself from the saddle, hit the boards rolling. His shoulder exploded in pain, but he kept moving, crashing through the store's front door as more bullets tore into the wood around him. Inside was chaos, a clerk screaming, diving behind the counter, shelves of goods, sacks of flour and sugar, barrels of nails and horseshoes. And there, at the back, stairs leading up. Cole ran for them, taking the steps 2 at a time despite his shoulder, hearing the store's front door crash open behind him. He reached the second floor, found himself in a storage room filled with crates and boxes, and moved to the window Webb had mentioned would be there. The window overlooked the street, giving him a view of the riders repositioning below. He smashed the glass with his gun barrel, creating a firing position, and took stock. 10 men he could see, maybe more he couldn't. Limited ammunition in his pistol and no rifle. A wounded shoulder that was definitely bleeding through the bandages now. And a store full of flammable materials if things got desperate enough. Not good, but not impossible. The first hunter came up the stairs fast, gun drawn, and Cole shot him in the chest before the man cleared the landing. The body tumbled backward, creating an obstacle for whoever came next. "Harland!" Webb's voice called from outside. "You're just making this harder on yourself." Cole didn't waste breath answering. He moved away from the window, found a position behind a stack of crates that gave him a view of both the stairs and the window, and waited. 2 more hunters tried the stairs together this time, both firing blind around the corner. Cole waited until they committed, then put bullets into both of them. One went down immediately, the other staggered back, clutching his side. 3, Webb's voice said, completing his count from earlier. The front of the store erupted in gunfire, multiple weapons firing at once. bullets punching through walls and windows, tearing apart shelves and merchandise. Cole pressed himself flat behind the crates, feeling impacts shake the floor around him, hearing wood splinter and glass shatter. Then, as quickly as it started, the firing stopped. "That was a taste," Webb called. "Next volley, we set fire to the building and shoot you when you run out. Or you can surrender now, walk out with your hands up, and we'll end this professionally." Cole checked his ammunition. 4 rounds left in his pistol, no way to reload without exposing himself. The wound in his shoulder had soaked through his shirt and was starting to affect his grip. And Webb wasn't bluffing about the fire. Cole could smell kerosene, someone splashing it against the store's wooden walls. He was out of options and out of time. But giving up wasn't in Cole's nature, even when it was the smart play. "Webb," he called out, "you really think Ellis is going to pay you after all this trouble? After you let me tear apart half your crew?" A pause, then Webb laughed. "You killed 3, wounded 2 more. The rest are fine. And yes, Ellis will pay. He's a man of his word when it serves him." Like his brother was a man of his word. Vernon was weak, made emotional decisions. Lawrence is different. He understands that business is business, nothing personal. "He threatened children," Cole said, buying time, trying to think. "Sarah Morrison's kids. That seem like business to you?" Another pause, longer this time. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Sure you do. You mentioned them yourself yesterday. Said Ellis knew where they were. That was a threat, Webb, clear as day." "That was a statement of fact. Mr. Ellis knows a great many things. What he does with that knowledge is his concern, not mine." Cole laughed, the sound harsh and bitter in the smoke-scented air. "That how you sleep at night? Tell yourself you're just a messenger, just following orders, just doing business? You're part of it, Webb. Every widow Ellis creates, every orphan, every burned farm, you helped make that happen. Philosophical debates won't save you, Harland. Not trying to save myself, just trying to make sure you understand what you're part of." The smell of kerosene was getting stronger, and Cole heard the strike of a match outside. Time was up. He moved to the window, smashed out the remaining glass, and looked down. The drop was brutal, at least 15 feet to the street below, and he'd be exposed the entire time. But staying meant burning alive. "Last chance," Webb called. "Walk out now or cook." Cole holstered his pistol, grabbed a blanket from one of the storage crates, wrapped it around his arm and head for whatever minimal protection it offered, and climbed onto the window ledge. Below, he could see the hunters repositioning, guns trained on the window, waiting for him to jump. Behind him, he heard the whoosh of flames catching, felt heat starting to build. "Don't do it," Webb said. "You jump, we shoot. You burn, you die anyway. Surrender is the only way you walk away from this." Cole looked down at the men below, at Webb in his expensive suit holding a rifle like he'd been born to it, at the other hunters with their desperate eyes and their dreams of $10,000. He thought about Sarah Morrison burning in her house, about Brennan and his crew walking into the Silver Spur, certain they were the hunters, about Cross and his 5 men riding away from that valley with their reputations ruined. And he thought about what Chen had said, that eventually Cole would run out of luck, that skill runs out and anger gets you killed. Maybe today was that day, but maybe not. Cole jumped. He hit the street hard, the blanket doing nothing to cushion the impact, his legs buckling, shoulders screaming, guns fired immediately, bullets kicking up dirt around him, one grazing his leg, another passing so close to his head he felt the heat. But then another sound cut through the gunfire. A whistle, sharp and official, followed by Chen's voice. "Drop your weapons. This is Deputy Chen, and you're all under arrest for arson and attempted murder." The shooting stopped, confusion spreading through the hunters. Cole looked up through eyes watering from impact and saw Chen standing in the middle of the street with a shotgun, flanked by 3 men wearing deputy badges that looked freshly minted. "This man is wanted for murder in Tucson," Webb said, his voice tight with frustration. "We have every right to apprehend him." "Maybe in Tucson," Chen said, "but this is Loadstone, and I'm the law here. You burned a building, you fired weapons in a populated area, and you endangered civilian lives. That makes you criminals in my jurisdiction. You can't be serious. Dead serious. Now put the guns down before I decide resisting arrest needs to be added to the charges." Webb's face went through several expressions: anger, calculation, disbelief. Finally, he lowered his rifle. The other hunters, seeing their leader comply, did the same. Chen moved to Cole, who was still on the ground, bleeding and trying to breathe through broken ribs he was pretty sure had come from the landing. "You all right?" "Been better," Cole managed. "Can you stand?" "Maybe. Give me a minute." Chen helped him up, which sent new waves of pain through his shoulder and ribs. The store behind them was burning properly now, flames reaching through the roof, black smoke billowing into the morning sky. "That's coming out of somebody's pocket," one of the deputies said. "Send the bill to Lawrence Ellis in Tucson," Cole said. "Care of Marcus Webb here." Webb's expression could have curdled milk. "This isn't over, Harland." "It is for today," Chen said. "You and your boys are spending the night in my jail while I sort out what charges to file. Could be attempted murder, could be destruction of property, could be a dozen other things. We'll see what the judge says when he comes through next week." "Ellis will have lawyers here before sunset," Webb said. "Let them come. I've got statements from witnesses, I've got the burned building, and I've got you idiots with guns still warm from firing. Bring all the lawyers you want." Two of the deputies moved to collect weapons from the hunters, while the third went to help with the fire, which was spreading to the building next door. The whole block might go if they didn't get it under control soon. Chen walked Cole away from the scene, toward his office, half carrying him when Cole's legs didn't want to cooperate. "You know this is temporary, right? Soon as my judge hears that you're wanted in Tucson, he'll have to release you to their custody." "I know. And Ellis will just send more hunters, more guns, more money. This doesn't end." "Probably not." They reached the office and Chen helped Cole into a chair, then started examining his wounds. The shoulder was bleeding steadily, the leg graze was superficial, but the ribs were definitely broken, maybe 3 of them. "You need a real doctor," Chen said. "Patterson's going to have words when he sees what you've done to his stitching. Add it to the list of people who want to kill me." Chen almost smiled. "You got more enemies than sense, you know that?" "Been told that before." The deputy pulled out bandages, started working on the shoulder wound with hands that were surprisingly gentle. "Why'd you do it? Jump out that window when you knew they'd shoot?" Cole thought about that. "Because staying meant burning, and I've seen enough people burn. Sarah Morrison, among others." Chen was quiet for a while, focusing on the bandages. When he spoke again, his voice was softer. "The telegram I sent to Red Creek came back this morning. Sheriff there says the Morrison kids and their aunt are safe. Nobody's bothered them. Says he'll keep watching, but so far it looks like Ellis was just talking." "Good. That's good. It doesn't change what you did, though. Vernon Ellis is still dead. You still killed him." "Yeah. Was it worth it? All this, the running, the fighting, the target on your back? Was it worth killing one bad man?" Cole met Chen's eyes. "Ask Sarah Morrison's kids in 10 years. Ask them if they're glad the man who killed their mother is dead. If they say no, I'll call it a mistake." Chen finished with the bandages and sat back. "You're either the most principled man I've met or the craziest. Haven't decided which." "Could be both." Outside, the sound of the fire was getting worse. More people shouting, the general alarm being rung. Loadstone was having the kind of morning that got talked about for years. And at the center of it, bleeding and broken but still breathing, sat Cole Harland. The man who'd killed Vernon Ellis and refused to apologize for it. The man who'd walked away from 3 bounty hunters and faced down 5 more. The man who'd jumped out a burning building rather than surrender to threats and money. He wasn't a hero, wasn't even trying to be. But in a territory where men like the Ellis brothers could burn widows and threaten children without consequence, maybe someone needed to show that there were still consequences, even if delivering them cost everything. Chen stood, moved to the window, and watched the fire burn. Word about this is going to spread fast. By tomorrow, every newspaper from here to California will be running stories about the shootout in Loadstone, about the man who fought off a dozen hunters and lived. I didn't ask for that. Doesn't matter. It's happening anyway. You're becoming something, Cole. A symbol, like Webb said. A story people tell when they want to believe that standing up to powerful men is possible. Stories don't stop bullets. No, but they inspire other people to try. And enough people trying, eventually something changes. Cole closed his eyes, suddenly exhausted. The adrenaline was fading, leaving behind just pain and the bone-deep weariness that came after violence. How long before you have to let me go? Judge comes through in 6 days. Until then, you're technically in protective custody while I investigate the incident. After that, it's out of my hands. 6 days. Make the most of them. Rest, heal, eat actual food. Because when you leave here, it's going to get worse before it gets better. Can't get much worse than jumping out a burning building. Chen looked at him, and there was something like pity in his eyes. Yes, it can. Ellis just lost face in a major way. Webb failed publicly, the hunters failed publicly, and you're sitting here drinking my bad coffee instead of hanging in Tucson. That kind of embarrassment demands a response. Let it come. It will. And when it does, I won't be able to help you. You'll be on your own. I've been on my own before. Chen nodded slowly. Yeah, I suspect you have. The deputy left to deal with the fire and the prisoners and the 100 other problems that came with a shootout in the middle of town. Cole sat alone in the office, listening to the sounds of controlled chaos outside, feeling his body catalog its injuries. Broken ribs, torn shoulder, graze on his leg, bruises from the jump that were already darkening. He'd live, but it would take time to heal, and time was something he didn't have. Through the window, he could see smoke rising from where the general store had been. Another building destroyed because of him. More people hurt because he'd chosen to make a stand instead of running. But running hadn't saved Sarah Morrison. Running hadn't stopped Vernon Ellis. And running wouldn't stop Lawrence Ellis from threatening children to get what he wanted. So Cole would stay, would heal, would face whatever came next because somebody had to. Outside, the fire was finally coming under control, and Loadstone was beginning the work of putting itself back together. Inside, Cole Harland closed his eyes and let himself rest for the first time in days. 6 days until the judge came. 6 days until he had to face what came next. 6 days to become the legend they were already making him into. It would have to be enough. The cell wasn't much, but it was better than burning alive. Cole sat on the thin mattress, his ribs wrapped tight enough to make breathing an adventure, and watched dawn break through the barred window for the 3rd time since the fire. 3 days in protective custody, 3 days of Patterson's visits to check his wounds and mutter about patients who didn't know how to stay still, 3 days of Chen bringing meals and updates about the world outside. The updates weren't encouraging. Webb made bail yesterday, Chen said, sliding a plate of eggs and bacon through the cell bars. Ellis sent lawyers like he promised. They argued that setting the fire was accidental, result of a shootout with a dangerous fugitive. Judge didn't buy it completely, but couldn't ignore that you are, technically, wanted for murder in Tucson. Cole took the plate. What's the damage? Webb and his crew pay for rebuilding the general store, cover medical costs for the 2 you shot in the stable, and they're banned from carrying firearms within Loadstone city limits for 6 months. Slap on the wrist, basically. And me? Chen pulled up a chair, sat backward on it with his arms crossed over the back. Judge arrives in 3 days, like I said. He'll hear the circumstances, review the warrant from Tucson, and make a decision. Best case, he gives you a head start before releasing you to Tucson's custody. Worst case, he hands you over to whoever Ellis sends to collect. What's your guess? Honest? I think he'll split the difference. Acknowledge you were defending yourself, but recognize that you're wanted for a crime in another jurisdiction. He'll probably give you 24 hours to get your affairs in order. Then you're Tucson's problem. Cole ate slowly, tasting nothing. His shoulder was healing, the stitches holding this time, but the ribs made everything difficult. He couldn't ride hard, couldn't fight effectively, couldn't do much except sit and wait for the law to decide his fate. It was driving him crazy. There's something else, Chen said, his voice careful. Been getting telegrams, lots of them, from towns all over the territory. About me, about you. Seems the story's spread faster than I expected. Papers are running it with headlines like Man Against Empire and The Hunter Who Won't Be Hunted. You're famous, Cole, or infamous, depending on who's telling the story. Great. That'll make hiding easier. You're not listening. Some of these telegrams, they're from people saying they saw what the Ellis family did in their towns. Burned farms, intimidated shopkeepers, ran people off land they wanted. They're saying if you could stand up to the Ellis brothers, maybe they can too. Cole set down his fork. That's going to get them killed. Maybe. Or maybe it changes things. When one person stands up, it's courage or stupidity. When 10 people stand up, it's a movement. When 100 do it, it's a revolution. I'm not trying to start a revolution. I just wanted Vernon Ellis to pay for what he did to Sarah Morrison. I know that. But intent doesn't matter now. You've become something bigger than your intentions. Chen stood, paced to the window. There's a telegram here from Red Creek. Sheriff says people in town heard about what you did, heard that you mentioned Sarah's kids when you refused Ellis's money. Says folks there are taking up a collection to help the aunt raise those children proper. They want to send it to you. Have you deliver it? Why would they send it to me? Because you're the one who stood up when nobody else would. Because you made Vernon Ellis's death mean something beyond just revenge. Chen turned back to face him. Whether you want it or not, you're a symbol now. The man who proved that the Ellis family can bleed. Cole leaned back against the wall, careful of his ribs. Symbols get people killed. Sometimes, but sometimes they give people hope. And hope is dangerous to men like Lawrence Ellis. The conversation ended there, Chen taking the empty plate and leaving Cole alone with thoughts that didn't bring any comfort. He hadn't wanted to be a symbol, hadn't wanted to inspire anyone. He just wanted one bad man to face consequences for his actions. But the world had taken that simple act and built something larger around it. And now people were watching to see what happened next. The next 2 days crawled past. Patterson came to check his wounds, declared him healing better than expected, and warned him again about infection. Chen brought food and news, each update painting a picture of a territory watching and waiting. Webb had left Loadstone, but was reportedly still in the area, waiting for the judge's decision. Ellis had sent more telegrams, each one more insistent than the last, demanding Cole be turned over immediately. And somewhere south, in Tucson, Lawrence Ellis was planning something. Chen could feel it in the tone of the messages, the way Ellis's lawyers were stalling and maneuvering instead of just demanding compliance. On the morning of the 6th day, Chen came to the cell earlier than usual. His face was grim. "Judge came in last night," he said. "Wants to see you in an hour. I'm supposed to bring you to the courthouse where he'll hear arguments and make his ruling." That was fast. He doesn't like staying in small towns longer than necessary. Says the beds hurt his back. Chen unlocked the cell. "I got you some clean clothes. Not much, but better than what you've been wearing." Cole changed slowly, his body still protesting movement. The clothes were simple. Work pants, a shirt that was only slightly too big, a vest that had seen better days. His own coat had been ruined in the fire, so Chen provided a replacement that smelled like horse and old leather. "You armed?" Chen asked as they prepared to leave. "You tell me. You're the one who's been holding my gun." Chen pulled Cole's pistol from a drawer, checked that it was unloaded, and handed it over along with a box of ammunition. "Loaded after the hearing. Judge won't appreciate you carrying loaded iron into his courtroom." They walked through Loadstone's streets, drawing stares from people who'd heard the stories, but were seeing the man for the first time. Cole kept his eyes forward, ignoring the attention, focusing on what came next. The courthouse was the nicest building in town. 2 stories of actual brick with glass windows that weren't cracked. Inside, the courtroom was already filling up, curious townspeople, a few men who might have been reporters, and near the front, Marcus Webb sitting with 2 lawyers in expensive suits. The judge sat behind his bench, a thin man with white hair and the kind of face that suggested he'd heard every excuse and believed none of them. His nameplate read Honorable Thomas Blackwood, and his eyes tracked Cole as Chen led him to a chair near the front. "Mr. Harland," the judge said, his voice carrying easily in the quiet room. "I've read the reports from Deputy Chen, the statements from witnesses, and the warrant from Tucson. I've also read about a dozen newspaper articles that make you sound like everything from a folk hero to a dangerous madman. Before I make my ruling, I'd like to hear from you directly." Cole stood, his ribs protesting. "What would you like to know, Your Honor?" "Did you kill Vernon Ellis in Tucson 6 months ago?" "I did." "And the 3 bounty hunters in the Silver Spur Saloon?" "They drew first. I defended myself." "And the 2 men you shot in the livery stable here in Loadstone?" "Same situation. They came at me with guns. I shot to wound, not kill." Blackwood leaned back in his chair. "You seem to have a talent for being in situations where shooting people becomes necessary." "I don't seek those situations out, Your Honor, but I don't run from them either." "Why not?" "Running seems like it would save you considerable trouble." Cole thought about how to answer that, aware that everyone in the room was listening. "Because running tells men like the Ellis brothers that they can do whatever they want without consequences. Vernon Ellis murdered a widow because she wouldn't sell her land. He burned her alive in her own house, and nobody did anything about it because he had money and influence. Running away from that doesn't stop it from happening again. It just teaches them they're untouchable. So you made yourself judge, jury, and executioner? No, sir. I made myself the consequence that the law couldn't or wouldn't provide. One of Ellis's lawyers stood. Your Honor, this is clearly a confession to premeditated murder. The defendant admits he killed Vernon Ellis, admits he did so deliberately. The law in Tucson demands he face trial for that crime. I'm aware of what the law demands, Mr. Harrison, Blackwood said dryly. I'm also aware that Vernon Ellis was never charged with Sarah Morrison's death, despite multiple witnesses placing him at the scene. Funny how the law works differently depending on how much money you have. Harrison's face tightened. The law is the law, Your Honor. Personal opinions about its fairness don't change its requirements. True enough. Blackwood turned back to Cole. Here's my problem, Mr. Harland. By the letter of the law, I should remand you to Tucson's custody immediately. You've admitted to killing a man, regardless of your justification. But I'm also aware that if I do that, you'll likely be dead before you see the inside of a courtroom. Lawrence Ellis has made it very clear through various channels that he wants you to face justice, and I suspect his version of justice involves a rope and a quick trial. Your Honor, that's a baseless accusation, Harrison protested. Is it? Then why did Mr. Ellis send you here with instructions to ensure Mr. Harlan is transported to Tucson in a private wagon with private guards instead of through official law enforcement channels? Harrison's silence was answer enough. Blackwood sighed. This is what I'm going to do. Mr. Harland, I'm releasing you from custody with the following conditions. You will leave Loadstone within 24 hours. You will not return to Tucson or attempt to contact anyone associated with the Ellis family. You will report to the Territorial Marshal's office in Santa Fe within 30 days to give a full statement about Vernon Ellis's death and the circumstances surrounding it. If you fail to comply with any of these conditions, I will issue a warrant for your arrest that every lawman in the territory will be obligated to enforce. Cole blinked, surprised. You're letting me go? I'm giving you a chance to face justice through proper channels instead of through Lawrence Ellis's hired guns. What you do with that chance is up to you. Blackwood turned to Harrison. And you can tell Mr. Ellis that if he wants Cole Harland tried for murder, he can make his case to the Territorial Marshal like everyone else. This court is adjourned. The gavel came down, and the room erupted in conversation. Harrison was on his feet immediately, arguing with his associate in furious whispers. Webb's face had gone red, his hands clenched on the table in front of him. Chen appeared at Cole's side, a small smile on his face. Well, didn't see that coming. Makes two of us. They walked out of the courthouse together, leaving the chaos behind. Outside, the sun was bright and warm, the kind of day that made you forget about broken ribs and burned buildings. You've got 24 hours, Chen said. I'd recommend you use about 6 of them to rest and 18 to get as far from here as possible. Santa Fe's north. It is. And between here and there are a lot of empty miles where accidents can happen to men traveling alone. Chen handed Cole a folded paper. Map. Show some trails that aren't on official records, places you can camp without being visible from the main roads. Use it. Cole took the map, studied Chen's face. Why are you helping me? Because Garrett asked me to, and I owe him. Because I think you might actually make it to Santa Fe if you're smart about it. And because sometimes the law needs a reminder that justice and legality aren't always the same thing. Chen extended his hand. Good luck, Cole. You're going to need it. They shook hands, and Cole felt the weight of genuine respect in the grip. Then Chen turned and walked back toward his office, leaving Cole standing in the street with a map, a loaded gun, and 24 hours to disappear. He headed for the livery stable, where Smoke was waiting, well-fed and rested. The stable hand helped him saddle up, moving carefully around Cole's injuries, and refused payment when Cole offered. You stood up to them, the kid said quietly. To the people who think money makes them better than everyone else. That's worth a free stall and some feed. Cole rode out of Loadstone an hour later, heading north on a trail that wound through hills and valleys, the map marked as difficult but passable. Behind him, the town faded into the distance. Ahead, somewhere in the vast empty territory, Santa Fe waited with its marshal and its questions and its version of justice. But between here and there, Cole knew, Webb and Ellis's hunters would be waiting. The judge's ruling had bought him time, not safety. They couldn't touch him in Loadstone, But out here in the wilderness, away from witnesses and the law, anything could happen. Cole rode for 3 hours before stopping to rest, finding a spot off the trail where he could see anyone approaching from either direction. His ribs ached, his shoulder was stiff, and exhaustion was settling into his bones like winter cold. But he was alive, he was free, and he had a destination. That was more than he'd had a week ago. He was checking Smoke's hooves when he heard the riders, multiple horses moving fast, coming from the south. Cole pulled his pistol, moved behind a rock formation that offered cover, and waited. 5 riders came into view. Not Webb's crew, and not professional hunters from their posture. They looked like ranchers or farmers, men who worked land instead of hunting men. They pulled up when they saw Smoke, hands moving near their weapons, but not drawing. "Cole Harland!" one of them called out, an older man with a weathered face and cautious eyes. "Depends on who's asking," Cole called back from his cover. "We're not hunters, we're from Red Creek. Sheriff there said you might be coming this way, asked us to watch the trails." Cole stayed behind the rocks. "Why would the sheriff in Red Creek care which way I'm headed?" "Because we asked him to. We're the folks who took up the collection for Sarah Morrison's kids. Heard you were in Loadstone, figured we'd meet you on the trail, deliver it personal." Slowly Cole emerged from cover, pistol still in hand but pointed down. "That was generous of you, but I'm not a courier. Send it through official channels." The older man dismounted, pulled a leather pouch from his saddlebag. "Already did. This is extra. From folks who heard what you did, who wanted to say thanks for making sure Vernon Ellis didn't get away with what he did." "I didn't do it for thanks. We know. That's why we're thanking you." He tossed the pouch to Cole, who caught it one-handed. It was heavy, coins inside shifting with the movement. "There's also a letter in there from Sarah's sister. She wanted you to have it." Cole opened the pouch, found the letter folded on top of the coins. The handwriting was shaky but clear. "Mr. Harland, I never met you and probably never will. But I wanted you to know that what you did for Sarah matters. She was a good woman who deserved better than what Vernon Ellis gave her. Her children ask about her every day, and now when they do, I can tell them that the man who hurt their mother faced justice. That might not seem like much, but it's everything to them. Thank you. Margaret Morrison." Cole folded the letter carefully, put it back in the pouch. "Tell Margaret I'm sorry for her loss, and tell her that if anyone from the Ellis family bothers her or the kids, to contact the territorial marshal in Santa Fe. Things are changing." "Are they?" the older man asked. "Seems like the Ellis family still owns half of Tucson and most of the judges." "For now. But word's spreading about what happened in Loadstone, about the judge who ruled against their lawyers, the deputy who arrested their hired guns. Other people are going to see that and realize they don't have to accept it anymore." One of the younger riders spoke up. "You really think that'll change anything? Men like Ellis have been running things since before we were born." Cole thought about that, about Chen's words regarding symbols and hope and revolutions that start with single acts of defiance. "I think every empire looks permanent until the day it falls, and the Ellis Empire just learned it can be challenged. That's a start." The men from Red Creek mounted up, preparing to head back. The older man paused, looked at Cole with something that might have been respect or might have been concern. "You watch yourself out there. Ellis isn't going to let this go. Men like him, when you hurt their pride, they come back harder. Let them come. I'll still be here." They rode off, heading south, leaving Cole alone with a pouch of coins, a letter from a grateful sister, and the knowledge that people were watching what happened next. Not just Ellis and his hunters, but ordinary folks who wanted to believe that standing up to power was possible. The weight of that realization settled on Cole's shoulders, heavier than any physical burden. He'd never asked to be a symbol, never wanted the responsibility that came with it. But refusing it now felt like betraying everyone who'd found hope in his defiance. He mounted Smoke and continued north, following Chen's map through trails that were barely trails at all. The landscape changed as he climbed, hills becoming mountains, sparse vegetation giving way to pine forests that smelled clean and ancient. On the 4th day out of Loadstone, Cole spotted the ambush before riding into it. 3 men positioned in the rocks above the trail, trying to stay hidden but silhouetted against the sky. Not professionals from the way they moved. Probably opportunists who'd heard about the $10,000 bounty and thought they could claim it. Cole dismounted, led Smoke into the trees and circled around. He got close enough to hear them talking before they knew he was there. "You sure he's coming this way?" one of them asked, young and nervous. Clerk at the courthouse heard the judge say, Santa Fe. This is the fastest route. The second voice was older, trying to sound confident and failing. What if he went a different way? What if we're sitting here for nothing? Then we wasted 3 days. But if he comes through and we get him, that's $10,000, worth the wait. Cole stood, making noise deliberately, and all three spun around with weapons half drawn. Looking for me? He asked. The three would-be hunters froze, hands on guns but not quite willing to complete the draw. They were farmers, Cole realized, desperate men who'd left their fields, hoping for a miracle payday. Easy, Cole said. Nobody has to get hurt here. You're Cole Harland, the older one said. It wasn't a question. I am, and you three are about to make a serious mistake. $10,000, one of the younger ones said, but his voice shook. That's more money than we'd make in 5 years farming. Probably. But you won't spend it if you're dead, and that's what happens if you draw on me. I've killed professional bounty hunters who are better at this than you. You think you'll fare better? They looked at each other, doubt creeping across their faces. Put the guns down, Cole said quietly. Go home to your farms. $10,000 isn't worth your lives, and your families need you more than they need money bought with your blood. The oldest one's hand moved away from his gun first, then the others followed. They stood there, defeated and embarrassed, probably realizing how close they'd come to dying for a bounty they'd never have collected. Smart choice, Cole said. Now go. And tell anyone else thinking about trying this that Cole Harland doesn't want to kill farmers. But he will, if they force his hand. They left, scrambling down the hillside and heading back the way they'd come. Cole watched them go, feeling older than his years. How many more would try? How many desperate men would throw their lives away chasing Ellis's money? The answer came 3 days later when he reached a town called Pine Ridge. News of the farmer's encounter had spread, grown in the telling. By the time it reached Pine Ridge, the story claimed Cole had faced down 10 armed men and talked them into surrender without firing a shot. The bartender who told him the story didn't recognize Cole as the subject until he laughed at the exaggeration. It was 3 men, Cole said, and they were farmers, not fighters, hardly 10 armed men. The bartender's eyes widened. You're him, you're Cole Harland. I am. Within an hour, half the town knew. And instead of hunters coming for the bounty, people came to shake his hand, buy him drinks, ask about Loadstone and the Silver Spur, and whether the stories were true. Cole found himself at the center of attention he didn't want, answering questions he hadn't expected. An old woman, maybe 70, approached him near midnight. My grandson is talking about heading to Tucson, trying to join some group fighting against the Ellis family. Says if you can stand up to them, so can he. I wanted to see the man who's filling his head with dangerous ideas. Cole looked at her, saw the fear and the anger and the desperate hope mixed together. Ma'am, I didn't ask anyone to fight. I just settled a personal debt. I know that, but you became something more whether you wanted to or not. My grandson, he's 17. Never fired a gun at another person. He goes to Tucson thinking he's you, he'll get killed. Then stop him. Tell him that fighting isn't glorious, that killing someone changes you in ways you don't come back from. Tell him that the only reason I'm alive is luck and experience, and he doesn't have enough of either. She studied his face for a long moment. Would you tell him that? If he came here, would you tell him yourself? Cole thought about saying no, about refusing that responsibility. But the old woman's eyes held something that wouldn't let him turn away. Send him over, he said finally. The grandson came 10 minutes later, tall and lean, with the kind of confidence that came from never having been truly tested. His name was Daniel, and his eyes held that dangerous gleam of someone who'd turned a man into a legend and wanted to become that legend himself. They talked for an hour. Cole told him about the fear before a fight, about the way your hands shake after killing someone, about the nightmares that come when you finally let yourself sleep. He told him about Brennan dying against a bar with understanding in his eyes, about Klein whispering that it wasn't fair, about the 2 farmers he'd shot in Loadstone who'd probably never work right again. The stories make it sound heroic, Cole said, but there's nothing heroic about watching men die because they were in the wrong place or made the wrong choice or just needed money. There's nothing glorious about killing. It's just necessary sometimes, and afterwards you carry it with you forever. Daniel's confidence had dimmed by the end. So you're saying I shouldn't fight? I'm saying fight if you have to, but don't go looking for it. Don't make fighting your identity. Because once you start down that path, it's hard to find your way back. The young man left, quieter than he'd come. The grandmother gripped Cole's hand briefly, whispered thanks, and followed her grandson out. Cole stayed in Pine Ridge that night, sleeping in a real bed for the first time since Loadstone. In the morning, he rode out early, continuing north toward Santa Fe and whatever waited there. The territorial marshal's office was in the center of Santa Fe, a solid building that looked like it had weathered a few sieges. Cole tied smoke outside and walked in, his ribs mostly healed now, his shoulders stiff but functional. The marshal was a bear of a man named Garrett Stone, no relation to the sheriff from the first town, though Cole wondered about the coincidence. Stone looked up from his desk when Cole entered, recognition immediate on his weathered face. "Cole Harland," Stone said. "Heard you might be coming. Judge Blackwood sent a telegram, said you had a story to tell." "That I do." They talked for 3 hours. Cole laid out everything. Vernon's crime, the hunt that followed, the confrontations in the Silver Spur and Loadstone, Webb's threats about the Morrison children. Stone listened without interrupting, taking notes occasionally, his expression unreadable. When Cole finished, Stone leaned back in his chair. "You know Ellis has lawyers preparing a case against you? They're calling it murder, premeditated, and cold-blooded." "I know. And you know that even with everything you've told me, a Tucson jury might convict you anyway? Ellis owns half that town." "I know that too." Stone studied him. "So why come here? Why not just disappear into Mexico or the territories? You've proved you can evade hunters." "Because running doesn't fix anything. It just postpones it, and I'm tired of postponing." The marshal stood, walked to his window, looked out at the street. "I've been hearing things. Stories about towns standing up to Ellis business practices, farmers refusing to sell when his agents come calling, sheriffs enforcing laws that Ellis usually got around through money and influence. You know why that's happening? People tell me it's because of what I did. It is. You showed them that the Ellis family isn't invincible, that their money and power can be challenged." Stone turned back to face him. "But here's the thing, Cole. If Ellis gets you convicted and hung, all that evaporates. It becomes a cautionary tale about what happens when you defy the powerful. Everything you started dies with you." "So what are you suggesting?" "I'm suggesting that I have jurisdiction over territorial crimes, which includes murder that crosses county lines. Vernon was killed in Tucson, but his business dealings affected multiple counties. I could argue that the crime falls under my investigation." Cole sat up straighter. "You'd do that?" "Depends. You willing to testify about everything Vernon did? All the farms he burned, all the people he intimidated, all the crimes that never got prosecuted because he had judges in his pocket?" "Every word of it." "It won't be easy. Ellis will fight me with every lawyer he can afford. The case might take months, maybe years, and you'll have to stay alive that whole time." "I've gotten pretty good at that." Stone smiled grimly. "Yeah, I've heard. All right, here's what we do. I'm taking your statement officially, filing charges against Lawrence Ellis for conspiracy in his brother's crimes, and requesting custody of you as a material witness. That takes you out of Tucson's reach legally. They can protest, but territorial jurisdiction trumps county. And the bounty? Still active until Ellis withdraws it, but anyone who collects is interfering with a territorial investigation, which carries its own penalties. Won't stop everyone, but it'll stop the smart ones." They spent the rest of the day making it official, Cole giving sworn testimony about everything he'd witnessed and learned about Vernon's crimes. By sunset, Stone had filed enough paperwork to tie up Ellis's lawyers for months. "You'll stay in Santa Fe," Stone said as they finished. "I've got a boarding house where witnesses stay, owners discreet. You keep your head down, don't go looking for fights, and let me build the case." "How long?" 4 months minimum. Could be longer. Can you handle that?" Cole thought about 4 months of waiting, of not moving, of letting the law work at its own pace. It felt wrong, felt like giving up control, but it also felt like maybe, finally, doing things the right way. "I can handle it," he said. The boarding house was quiet and clean, run by a widow named Mrs. Chen, again with the names, Cole thought, who asked no questions and served meals that reminded him of home if he'd ever really had one. Cole settled into a routine, mornings helping with odd jobs around the boarding house, afternoons reading newspapers that tracked the growing resistance to Ellis business practices, evenings sitting on the porch and watching Santa Fe's streets. News filtered in through those newspapers and through Stone's occasional updates. Webb had returned to Tucson, his reputation damaged beyond repair. Cross and his crew had split up, unable to find work together after their failure. Ellis had withdrawn the $10,000 bounty after his lawyers informed him it was interfering with the territorial investigation, but rumors said he was planning something else, something bigger. 2 months into his stay, Cole received a visitor. A young woman, maybe 25, with determined eyes and a carpet bag that looked like it had traveled hard miles. "Mr. Harland? I'm Margaret Morrison, Sarah's sister." Cole stood quickly, surprised. "Miss Morrison, your letter meant a lot. You didn't need to come all this way." "I did, actually. I wanted to thank you in person, and I wanted you to meet someone." She gestured behind her, and 2 children emerged from the boarding house doorway. A boy maybe 9 and a girl around 7, both with their mother's eyes. "This is Thomas and Emily," Margaret said, Sarah's children. They wanted to meet the man who made sure their mother's death wasn't forgotten. The children stared at Cole with wide eyes, and he found himself at a loss for words. "What do you say to orphans whose mother you'd avenged but couldn't save?" "Your mother was a brave woman," he said finally. "She stood up for what was hers, didn't back down even when powerful men tried to make her. You should be proud of her." "Are you going to kill more bad people?" the boy, Thomas, asked directly. "Thomas!" Margaret said, shocked, but Cole shook his head. "It's all right." He knelt down, putting himself at the children's eye level. "I hope I don't have to. I hope the law can handle bad people from now on, so folks like me don't need to get involved. That's what I'm trying to help with here." "Good," Emily said quietly, "because Aunt Margaret cries when she thinks about people dying." Margaret's eyes were wet, but she smiled. "They've been through enough violence. I wanted them to see that you're not just a gunfighter or a killer. You're a person who did what he thought was right, and now you're trying to do right the proper way." They stayed for dinner, Mrs. Chen fussing over the children and making sure they ate enough. Afterward, Cole walked with them to their hotel, carrying Emily when she got tired. At the hotel steps, Margaret took his hand. "Thank you," she said simply, "for everything. For Sarah, for the children, for showing that justice is still possible." Cole nodded, not trusting his voice. Watching them go inside, he felt something shift in his chest. This was why he'd come to Santa Fe, why he'd chosen to face the law instead of running. Not for himself, but for children who deserved to grow up in a world where powerful men faced consequences. 3 months and 2 weeks after arriving in Santa Fe, Marshal Stone called Cole to his office. The marshal looked tired but satisfied. Ellis's lawyers tried to get the case dismissed, Stone said, argued that Vernon's death was a separate crime from any business dealings. Judge didn't buy it. "We're going to trial in 6 weeks, federal court, with a judge who can't be bought and a jury pulled from across the territory. Ellis will still try to influence them, probably, but we've got testimony from 47 people Vernon hurt or threatened. We've got documents showing the pattern of intimidation. And we've got you, willing to admit you killed him and explain exactly why. That's a strong case, Cole." "What happens to me after the trial?" Stone was quiet for a moment. "Honestly, I don't know. Best case, jury finds that killing Vernon was justified given the circumstances and you walk free. Worst case, you're convicted of manslaughter and serve time. Most likely case is somewhere in the middle, some kind of punishment balanced against the understanding that the law failed Sarah Morrison first. I can live with that. Can you? Because even if you walk free, Ellis will still want you dead. The bounty might be gone, but the grudge isn't. You'll be looking over your shoulder for the rest of your life." Cole thought about that, about a life spent watching for threats, never fully at peace. Been doing that since the war. At least now it's for something that matters. The 6 weeks passed in a blur of preparation. Cole met with Stone's lawyers, went over his testimony dozens of times, learned how to present his story in a way that made sense to people who'd never faced violence. Margaret Morrison came back with the children, prepared to testify about Sarah's death. Other witnesses arrived, farmers who'd lost land, shopkeepers who'd been intimidated, even a few former Ellis employees willing to talk about orders they'd been given. The trial was set for the first week of autumn, in a federal courthouse that drew observers from across the territory. Cole walked in wearing borrowed clothes that were too formal, feeling exposed without his gun, and took his seat at the defendant's table. Lawrence Ellis sat across the aisle with his lawyers, and for the first time Cole saw the man whose brother he'd killed. Ellis was older than Vernon had been, maybe 50, with gray hair and the kind of face that looked expensive, well-fed, well-groomed, well-accustomed to getting what it wanted. His eyes, when they met Cole's, were cold, calculating, showing no grief for his brother, only anger at the inconvenience Cole represented. The trial lasted 8 days. The prosecution laid out Vernon's pattern of violence and intimidation. Margaret testified through tears about Sarah's death. A former ranch hand testified that he'd seen Vernon order the fires set. An accountant testified about falsified documents and bribed officials. And on the 7th day, Cole took the stand. He told the whole story, leaving nothing out. The investigation he'd done, the witnesses he'd talked to, the certainty he'd felt that Vernon Ellis would never face legal consequences. He admitted tracking Vernon to Tucson, confronting him in a saloon, giving him one chance to confess and face the law properly. "What did he say?" the prosecutor asked. He laughed, said I couldn't prove anything, that he had judges and lawyers who'd bury any charges. Said Sarah Morrison was nobody, and nobody would care that she was dead. And then I shot him 3 times, made sure he was dead, walked out, and never looked back. The courtroom was silent. The prosecutor continued, "Do you regret killing Vernon Ellis?" Cole thought about his answer carefully. "I regret that it was necessary. I regret that the law Sarah Morrison trusted to protect her failed so completely that a stranger had to become her justice. But do I regret that Vernon Ellis is dead and can't hurt anyone else? No, I don't regret that." The defense tried to break him, asking about his military record, suggesting he was a trained killer who'd enjoyed ending Vernon's life. Cole answered calmly, truthfully, refusing to be rattled. "I don't enjoy killing," he said at one point, "but I understand it, and I understood that men like Vernon Ellis operate in the spaces where the law is slow or absent or corrupt. Someone had to step into that space. It happened to be me." The jury deliberated for 2 days. When they returned, the foreman stood and read the verdict. "We find the defendant Cole Harland guilty of manslaughter in the death of Vernon Ellis, with extreme mitigating circumstances." The judge nodded slowly. "Mr. Harland, please stand." Cole stood, his heart steady despite not knowing what came next. "You have been convicted of taking a life, which this court cannot and will not excuse. However, the circumstances of that death and the systematic failures of justice that preceded it weigh heavily on this sentence. You are hereby sentenced to 2 years in the territorial prison, with credit for time already served awaiting trial. You will also be placed on supervised release for 3 years following your incarceration, during which time you will report regularly to Marshal Stone and refrain from any violent acts unless in clear self-defense." 2 years. Less than Cole had expected, more than he'd hoped. But as he was led from the courtroom, he caught Margaret Morrison's eye. She was crying again, but she was smiling too, and she mouthed 2 words, "Thank you." Outside, as he was being transferred to the prison wagon, a crowd had gathered. People from the trial, from the newspapers, from towns across the territory where the story had spread. They weren't cheering, weren't celebrating, but they were there, bearing witness. And standing at the edge of the crowd, Cole saw Chen from Loadstone, who'd traveled to Santa Fe for the verdict. The deputy nodded once, a gesture of respect between men who understood that sometimes justice required sacrifice. Cole nodded back, then climbed into the wagon. 2 years in prison. It would be hard, maybe dangerous if Ellis's influence reached inside the walls. But it was finite. It was a price he could pay. And when he got out, the world would be different. Not perfect, not fixed, but different. The trial had exposed the Ellis family's practices to public scrutiny. Several investigations had been launched into their business dealings. Towns were standing up, refusing to be intimidated. One man had challenged an empire, and while it hadn't fallen, it had cracked. Others would widen those cracks, break off more pieces, until eventually the whole corrupt structure came down. Cole hadn't set out to be a symbol or a catalyst or a legend. He just wanted Vernon Ellis to pay for killing Sarah Morrison. But sometimes the world takes simple acts and builds monuments from them. Sometimes one person standing up becomes the spark that lights 1,000 other fires. As the prison wagon rolled out of Santa Fe, Heading toward 2 years of confinement and whatever came after, Cole thought about Daniel, the grandson from Pine Ridge who'd wanted to be a fighter. About Margaret Morrison's children, who'd lost their mother but gained the knowledge that justice was possible. About all the people who'd found courage in his defiance. He'd paid the price for his actions, would pay more of it in the years ahead. But looking back at the crowd still gathered in front of the courthouse, at the reporters writing their stories, and the witnesses returning to their lives, and the ordinary people who'd come to see what happened when power was challenged, Cole knew it had been worth it. Some prices were worth paying, and some names, once spoken, changed the world. The wagon moved on, carrying Cole Harland toward prison and the uncertain future beyond. Behind him, the legend grew. Ahead of him, 2 years and then freedom, and whatever that freedom would mean in a territory that had learned the lesson he'd taught. That power could be challenged, that justice sometimes required sacrifice, that one person standing up could change everything. It wasn't the ending Cole had imagined when he'd walked into that Tucson saloon 6 months ago. But it was the ending that mattered. And sometimes that was enough.